Bam. Okay, now I'm ready to rock. Okay, so I literally wanted to pack a lot in here because I want you not only to get, like normally I do like, 3-4 day events, and I really wanted you guys to experience as much growth as possible, as much awareness as possible. Literally, this is like I have to pinch myself and wake up all the time because this is my favorite subject and I get to talk to you guys about it and you get to be here, and it's just such a beautiful opportunity. We live in a wonderful world and the internet has completely changed our lives. You will all get a copy of this recording after, so you don't need to take notes unless you want to take notes. You will also be getting a copy of the slides. And you'll get a copy of all the links to books that I mention or anything that I mention. I have a little notepad here and I'm gonna write it down. And about a couple hours after the recording's done, because it takes time to process, I will send it all to you. So just know that you can watch this as many times as you want. This subject, as I said, is easily my favorite. And I think dating is one of those complex things that we don't really understand fully why we do what we do and how we actually maximize our time in dating. Even I'm not even sure that we conceptually understand what dating really is. Before I get into the full presentation though, and I have slides because I think I'm such a visible learner, and I want you guys to, when you go back through this, to use the slides to be able to do some exercises and think about things. So if you see your chat box, you'll see that there is a 2 with a blue thing and it says all panelists or all panelists and attendees. What I want you to do is click down so it says all panelists and attendees. So if you're chatting, because everyone else, if they can see what you're saying, will often learn from what you're saying, or a question you're asking, it will be confusing if it's not shown. So all panelists and attendees, so make sure you do that. Secondly, there's a Q&A box. At the end, I'm gonna answer questions in that. If you wanna be more anonymous about your questions, you can ask them in the Q&A and you can just put them in there. So with all that said, let's rock. So how this actually looks is when we actually look at what we're creating, we know that moving towards positive emotion is actually more important than thinking of what we're gonna miss. So like if we think, well, if I don't find this relationship, I'm gonna end up old and alone. That's not a great motivator for actually creating change. It's not a great motivator for doing anything. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down at the top of this piece of paper that you brought, when I am in the relationship I love, I look forward to, and what are the feelings that you look forward to having? And what do you look forward to creating from that space? So I just want you to take 20 seconds, and I want you to do this. I can't monitor that you're doing it because we're online, but if I had a digital punch button, if you weren't doing it, it would digitally punch you in the side of the head to wake you up. So I want you to actually do this. So what do you look forward to feeling? How do you look forward to feeling? And what do you look forward to creating? This is so important because it's allowing yourself to connect to positive emotion, to actually dream, to hope, to wonder. And it moves you towards feelings that are positive are better drivers than feelings that are negative. Okay. So if you want to raise your hand, there's a little raise hand button. That would be like raising the roof. So when we're ready to go, you guys raise the roof. Can you raise the roof when you're done doing that? There should be, oh, there we go. I see it. It's coming like a wildfire, which that's probably a bad reference point in Western Canada and the United States. So I apologize for that. Okay, so we're gonna rock. Okay, so what is dating? Right? Like when you guys think of dating, what is it to you? So like for you, is it practicing? Do you do it in order to find your partner? You can just write in the chat box. Like, what is dating to you? Why do you do dating? Is it to find someone to marry, get to know someone? Okay. And remember, all panelists and attendees in the chat window, guys. Practice, have fun, a nightmare, to find a long-term partner, exploration, find someone to marry, companionship, seeking, find partnership. Feels like interviewing potential partners. I love this. Great sex. Okay, yeah, true. Shared experiences to find a long-term, probably not just great sex, though. There's probably some bad sex in the dating, right? Have fun, deeper connection, interview. Beautiful. So the word sorting for a long-term partner, I want you to start to think of dating as sorting. I want you to really start to think about dating being a sorting practice. So the better you are at sorting, the better you are at picking, right? Like if you watch my Instagram lives or just the videos I've done, I talk a lot about how we have to be so discerning with what we're picking, because we're picking someone to share our life with. And I forget what the like age, if you die at the average age of like 80, you'll share something like 90,000 meals with this person. So you fucking better pick someone you want to share some meals with, right? So it is an investment, but I want you to think about fixing your picker, right? Which sounds dirty always when I say it. I'm like, yeah, I got to get a new way of saying that. But I want you to think about really being aligned with what you're picking, that dating is sorting, and that here's a real big switch, is that when you're dating and you're meeting people, you're actually learning if you want to choose them. You're not waiting to be chosen by someone. A lot of people date that way. Like when I find someone who wants me, then I'll just take them. But I want you to actually shift to this place of power, which is you're dating to choose someone, to decide if they're a good fit. That way what happens is you don't end up sort of stuck in this idea of, I hope they like me. You shift to this power position when you go, I'm not really, I don't have enough information yet. And if you fall in love on the first date, that's a good sign that you're falling too quickly. Doesn't mean you can't lust after them or decide that they're attractive or anything like that. It's just that if you're really dropping L-bombs right away, then it means that you have to start to assess, are you picking them or are you just waiting to be chosen? You're just waiting for a connection and then everything will magically happen. Life isn't fucking Disney, which is okay, but we also have to recognize that dating is a process, and also relationships aren't always simple. And I do love the idea of, you know, it being a fuck yes or no, that it's either a fuck yes and you want a second date with them or you don't. And if it's not a fuck yes, then don't fucking do it. Now, the caveat to the fuck yes and no rule is that when you actually get to the place where you're in a relationship with someone, you know, and it's been like 3 or 4 years, you got to recognize that sometimes your partner's not going to be a fuck yes, right? When they Dutch oven you again, you're like, God damn it, can you not do that? So, right, they're not always going to be a fuck yes, but the choice is what you want, right? Like choosing them and having the safety to be chosen. This is why we create agreements when we're dating. This is why we get clear on what we're looking for. So dating also offers an immense opportunity to heal. How you date is a beautiful playground for you to practice boundaries, for you to practice expression, because I don't want you to think about, and I didn't put this later in the presentation, but it's so important, I should have, so I'm putting it in right now, is I want you to think about letting go of this idea of the one. Because as soon as you think, is this person the one, they have to be the one, I have a connection with them, then you're going to operate from a very scarce place. And that means that you're going to be afraid to let them go, even if they're exhibiting poor behavior, even if they're not a great person. But because you feel a connection with them and you feel like they're the one, what often I have a client who used to call it that she has last man on earth syndrome, that every time she met a guy she had a connection with, she felt like he might be the last man on earth. And that causes you to act very differently. So again, I want you to think about dating as sorting, shifting to the power position of I'm choosing them. I'm discerning if they're a great fit for me. I'm not waiting to be chosen, shifting the power. And the third part, that you actually are being offered an opportunity to heal. So if you find that you're dating similar people over and over again, then it's time to check yourself. Okay. So I love this picture because it really discerns a very simple concept, which is whatever is in your external world will match your internal world. And when someone first said that to me, I remember being like, that sounds really floaty. You should smoke more weed because you haven't smoked enough, because that's so goony goo goo. Right. But what is happening is, when I finally conceptualized it, and I'm going to explain it to you, is that whatever you see outside your world, whatever you see in your life, is evidence of what you believe about yourself. And I'm going to come back to beliefs a lot, and the next little bit is on beliefs. But I want you to think about that. Everything that is in your external world represents what you believe about yourself. So if anything in your external world that's happening, the career you choose, the partnership you're in, the way you treat people, the way you allow yourself to be treated, the way you act in conflict, if any of those things cause you to feel like you're unworthy, you will feel unworthy. But if you feel worthy inside, you'll begin to make choices outside that reflect worthiness. So if you've ever seen my other webinar, which I could put the link in for, on boundaries, when you have great boundaries, you communicate to people around you that you love yourself. When you communicate to people that you have boundaries, you also communicate to yourself that you love yourself. So it's the symbiotic relationship that boundaries create self-worth creates boundaries. Like, it's a beautiful thing, but one requires the other. So, I love this slide. It's one of my favorites. We've got the pooer. But the reason that I put up this slide is I want you to think about what are some of the bullshit beliefs that you hold on to about relationships. Like things like that. And I'll show you just what some of those can be, okay? So as I go through them, I want you to, in the chat box, put yep, nope, whatever it is. If it's yours, just say yep. We won't need nopes. We don't need nopes. Okay, so the first one is, there's no good men or women out there. Who adheres to this belief? Yep, yes. There's a caps yes up in there. Sorta. What's a sorta? There's no such thing as sorta. There's like a yeah or a no. That's a sometimes. Nah, okay, I like that. Okay, but so there's one. It's hard to date in, insert the goddamn city, town, school. Fuck, I hear this one all the time. This one, yeah, Fort Lauderdale, right? I love how someone fit Vancouver, caps. Okay, suburbia. Okay, right? So there we go. So this shows you. Online dating is just for hookups. Come on, who's got this one? Yuck, yes. I think you meant to say fuck yes, but yuck, yes is possible too. Yes, right? Tinderland, not always. Good when you're old. When you're old, I don't agree with that one. Okay, Bumbleina, I love it. I date in my head. That's not gonna work well, Callie, but I love you. Okay, so all men are cheaters. Once a cheater, always a cheater. That's usually more of a gender-based one. So we could say all women are cheaters too, if there's men on here, or women who are in same-sex relationships. All men are narcissists, emotionally unavailable. Yeah, right? That's, we're gonna talk about that one, don't you worry. Okay, so next one. I only attract assholes, nice guys. Like either one of those. Yes. Oh man, don't worry, you're gonna get a copy of this chat. For all the people who try to follow this chat after, it's gonna be long as shit, right? Okay, story of my life. Okay, boys, you attract boys, men, assholes. Okay, then next one, I attract unavailable men or women. Sorry, I meant to have that say women too. Yes. Wow, this one's a real douchebags. I mean, we could put them in any category of a-hole. Married with kids, that's a big alarm there. A little red flag. Don't worry, guys. We're going to call your asses out on all this stuff. Men like easy women. Who likes that belief? And there's another one, which is, no. Okay, men like bitches. That's a book. So that's a perpetuated story, right? What about women just like men with money? None of these are resonating with you. That's okay, Sid. No. Okay, cool. Men, women are shitty communicators. Just pick the gender that's opposite to yours. Or like your gender that you choose. Men, yes. Men, yes. Hey, us men, if there's any men on here, right? Hold the phone. Okay, so people are bad. Yeah, I actually agree with that one. Okay, what about all relationships lead to disappointment? Oh man, I love this. This is actually, it just shows you though how we tend to have this. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some possible beliefs that you can have about yourself. I don't deserve love. I must earn love to deserve it. I'm not lovable. To be lovable, I must always agree. I'm not important. So what I want you to do is you're gonna have the opportunity. So if you go through this list, I want you to have the opportunity later, because I don't wanna, that's not the most valuable use of our time right now. But I want you to really think about which ones of these actually are possible beliefs that you hold beneath the surface. And then there's some about relationships. So these are beliefs about relationships that you can have. So those were some examples I gave you on the list, but here's actual lists of ones. So you're gonna get these in follow-up. But I want you to go through them, because what I'm also gonna do is give you a meditation from Joe Dispenza that is about shifting core beliefs. We're going to get a little more into core beliefs. So I'm going to show you some myths about relationships, and I'm going to disprove them for you, okay? But I want you to just think about everything you choose in dating and relationships. If you lack boundaries, if you're picking poor partners, if you're attracting assholes, if you're attracting unavailable people, if you only attract women who want money, if you're, whatever the thing is, whatever belief you have is really just a protection from allowing yourself access and your heart to actually be loved. So just so you know that, whatever belief you have. Now, it can be founded in a true experience. It's just that that experience is maybe no longer valid in your future, right? Because your future hasn't happened yet. But it often is the thing that causes a hypersensitivity in our body, so we don't allow people in. So I'm going to go through some myths about relationships. The first myth is that divorces are actually increasing. I'm going to use Canadian data. I don't have US data, but I'm going to use Canadian data. And since Canada and the US are pretty much the same except for our leaders, we'll just get into that. So this graph, if you look at the y-axis, the number, that's the number of marriages over time. If you look at the bottom, the x-axis, you see the year. So in 1968, the Divorce Act was inputted. And what that meant was, before the Divorce Act, you could actually not get divorced unless a province, or if you're American or somewhere else in the world, if your government approved of your divorce. And then, so in 1968, the Divorce Act, you could see a ton of divorces kicked up when the Divorce Act came in. It said you had to be separated for 3 years before you could get divorced. You also have the feminist revolution and the sexual revolution going on at exactly that time. And then you have a kick up in '86. You can see that big line go up, and that's a huge increase in divorces because they moved from 3 years of separation to just 1. So if you were separate, you only had to do 1 year of separation, and then you could end the relationship. So a lot of people went, I could hack a year. 3 years was hard, but let's do a year. And then a bunch of divorces happen. And so what happens with this is that, you know, divorce is actually dropping. And these are people married in the 2000s. I'll make this graph quite simple to understand. The left side is the percentage of marriages that end in divorce. On the bottom is the years of marriages. You can see the bottom line, married in the 1960s, that's the before the actual Divorce Act came in. So that's how many marriages ended in divorce before the Divorce Act. And you can see that the percentage goes up and up, but it starts to go down when people are married in the 90s, and it's going even further down with people married in the 2000s. So my point is that divorce is actually dropping. And we have this perpetual idea that if I get married, I'm going to get divorced. Well, if that's your fear, it's likely going to happen. That's, of course, true. And the other side of this is that we have to start recognizing that the reason we get married is totally different than it used to be historically. We didn't marry for love till the 19th and 20th century. So the number of marriages is actually dropping too. Less people are getting married because of the birth control pill. Less people are getting married because of the information that we're taught about marriage. Less people are getting married because of the birth control pill, because people aren't banging, having babies after one night stands and then getting married, or getting accidentally pregnant, but they should never actually be a couple and raising a child. They're not doing that anymore. So God bless that, right? And then the next part is that people are getting married a lot later, so there's more maturity when they actually get married. So that's an important thing. The research shows that if you get married, the older you get married, the more likely your success of marriage. The next myth is being in a relationship is better than being single. Man, we have really said this, right? We've created a hierarchy in relationships where we say, if you're married, you're better than people who are engaged. And if you're engaged, you're better than people who are dating. And if you're dating, you're better than people who are single. And God, if you have the single disease, what do we say to people who are single? We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you have a partner yet? And then we put divorced people below that, which is even more worse, right? Is we put them below that because we say they're broken. Now, I want you to understand that if we started to actually, if we learn from our divorce, that's the most important part. People who get divorced tend to go against their narratives. They go against the narratives of their culture, of their society. They had to make a decision that went against something, and it was a very strong decision to make. So I want you to see how inspiring that can actually be. So if I found, you know, my partner, she was divorced when she was younger. That's one of my favorite things about her, because it's where she learned so much about herself. She learned when she wants to fight for something and when it's not practical. There's so much beauty in the experience. But let's take a look at what we think about this. This is one of my favorite websites, is the Wait But Why site, and he drew these really good graphs. So the first one is that we have this idea, right, that they have it all figured out, and there's me, sad, at the bottom of the staircase, and there's the couples that are happy at the top of the staircase. And here's the reality, though, is that there's you, and then there's couples that are both happy, and there's couples that are both sad. But if someone who's in a bad relationship or a very high conflict relationship, they're actually further away from a good relationship than you are, because they have to end the relationship that's not good, and then they have to do the growth and work, and then they have to figure out how to create a good relationship, find a new partner, and then walk up that little figured it all out staircase. But for you, or even if you're dating and just casually dating, it doesn't really matter. You can transform your relationship into one, because you're in a place where you don't have to go down the staircase, you just get to go up it. So there's a lot of positivity in this experience. And in the research has shown that it's not people in relationships who are happy, it's happy people who have great relationships. And there's research that follows people in college, and that's I don't need to go through that research, just take my word for it. But we have this misconception and this idea that when I get into a relationship, I'll be happy. But the actual thing is when I get happy, I'll find a great relationship. That's the way you want to think about it. So I really love this quote, which is, "My alone feels so good. I'll only have you if you're sweeter than my solitude." And I think this is such a beautiful quote to live by. So if you can learn to get into that space where you love your solitude, but you don't create walls around your solitude, and you still allow people in, that's the exception, right? Okay, so myth number 3, love cannot last. This is actually one of my favorite ones to break, and that is, there's research, so if you look at that, those are brain scans. On the left side is people in the study, on the right side is people in the honeymoon phase of the relationship. So they took, or sorry, on the left side is honeymoon phase, on the right side is, there you go, dopamine is dope. What a beautiful saying. So what happens is so I'll explain this graph to you. On the left side, new love, people in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. On the right side, in this study by Helen Fisher et al., she's an anthropologist who studies the brain of love. She found people who are very much in love, who have been in long-term relationships, and she asked them, they have to still be very much in love. They've been married on average 21.1 years, I believe. For some of them, it's their second or third marriage. And the same places in their brains lit up as the people in the honeymoon phase of their relationship. And as a control group, they took people who just got dumped, they put them in an MRI machine, and then you got to compare what parts of someone's brain lit up when they just got dumped, which that's too bad. You got dumped, go in this little tube, we'll scan your brain. But what I want you to notice about this is they also took the people in the very long-term relationships who were very much in love, and they also compared the picture of and the thoughts of a friend. And so that way they could separate romantic love from friendship, companionate, friendship love. And if that alarm goes off, then we got a problem. But the same places as the honeymoon phase of the brain light up as these people. So I want you to see that you can create it, you can find it. Part of it is finding a great partner. The other part of it is learning how to maintain great love. And that, of course, is a skill set. Okay, so I will never love again. I hear this often a lot from people who get divorced, people who are older. And I just think you're never too old for love. You're never too old for another relationship. I was on a plane ride once, and I was sitting beside this really lovely lady who was in her late 60s, and she had just come back from her mother's wedding. And her mother was 91. And she said to me that it was her mother's third marriage. First marriage, the guy passed away, and then the next one was for 20 years, and she was 87 when he passed away, and she met her last husband in an old folks home, and he said to her daughter, "Your mother is the love of my golden years." And I loved that. I thought, and so her family said to her, "Don't you think you should wait, because the other guy kicked the bucket at 87, and he was a minister or something of the church, I can't remember, but they were like, shouldn't you just wait, just out of respect for their family?" And she was like, "I'm 91. Like, I could die in any moment. Like, fuck that shit. I'm going to get married." So she did. So I wrote an article about it because I was so moved by it. And she's like, I could go at any moment, so fuck that. And isn't it amazing how when we get older, our tolerance for bullshit and other people's opinions actually goes down? And so you have to start dating now from the biological perspective that you don't have time to wait. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So here's a graph. If you look at the left side, is the y-axis is the measure of happiness. The middle, the dotted line, is year 0, so when the event occurred. So the top line is got married. Bottom line with the triangles is got divorced. So I want you to see that when people get married, their happiness rises on the day they get married, and then it tends to drop. It doesn't rise again. Again, this is research, so I just want you to know that it's a picture. It's just a picture. Research is just a picture, so it doesn't mean every time or all the time. So what happens is people, when they get married, or you see it go up when they get engaged, and then when they get married, and then it usually doesn't rise again fully to the time pre-marriage or marriage time till the kids leave the house. So that's a long fucking time, right? But for people who get divorced, we think we'll never be happy again. We'll never love again. I just disproved that one. But if you look, happiness actually rises, and you can see it drops shortly before, and then you have the 1 year before the actual divorce happens, which is the separation, and then happiness starts to rise. So I just want you guys to be offered a different experience than what our cultural narratives have been. Because our cultural narratives, the stories we learn, the stories we're taught to live, they end up becoming our lives. And not because they're true, but because we've been told they're the only way and they're what's supposed to be true. And that's fucking bullshit. That's how I feel about it. So every relationship needs to last forever. This is a myth, because and I get that people get a little triggered by this often, but my point about this is, don't make needing a relationship to last forever be your expectation. Make it your intention. And what I mean by that is, when you make it your intention, then it will guide your behavior every day. But if you make it your expectation and you're worried that you will get divorced or you will break up, then you're not going to have conversations that are hard, and you're not going to show up as your best self. You know, this is what happens, is that because we've made being in a relationship more important than being single. As a society, we have, I get fired up about this, if I could tell I was about to get fired up. In society, we have said that if someone chooses you, then you're worth being chosen. You're worthy of being chosen. If someone chooses you, then you're worthy. So the relationship is evidence of our worthiness. And so if we don't have the relationship, we have unworthiness. So we want to get the relationship to feel good about ourselves. So because we've made being in a relationship a status thing, and we've made it mean that if you're in a relationship, it means someone thought you were worthy of being chosen. If you're not in one, then we feel like we're not worthy of being chosen. So our worthiness hangs in the other person's choosing of us. But when that happens, we give away our self-worth to our partner. And what happens is our whole life becomes our relationship. And then if we lose our relationship, we lose our self-worth in ourselves. So I want you to pay attention to this, because this is what we've been fucking taught. This is what we've been doing. And we shouldn't do this. It's not helpful to us, right? So I want you to move it from an expectation to an intention, and let that intention drive your behavior in every moment. When you're afraid to have a conversation, when you're afraid to speak up, when you're afraid to get into conflict, when you're afraid to bring a wall down, every time that you're afraid to do something that is going to move you in the direction of your own self-worth, you have to step towards it. Okay. So how are we feeling? That infuriates me about fucking society too. I'm gonna drink some water, wet my whistle here. Hold on. All right, can we raise the roof and get a little, don't let it break your heart. Let it break your heart open so that you're different. If you're feeling moved by this, then allow it to motivate you. Allow it to bring energy into your heart to change, to create. Okay, so now we're gonna fucking really get into the why. Why are we bad at dating? Why are we bad at it? Because we often are very bad at it. God, I gotta open this. I'm sweating. Oof. Now that kid's not crying, so that's good. I'm sure he'll be back though. All right. So why are we bad at dating? I'm gonna give you my little list breakdown, and then we're gonna fuck stuff up. Okay. So the first one is that we actually don't know what the fuck we want. And so we're fucking just throwing enough shit at the wall and we just hope it figures it out. So we're going to get intentional about dating. We're not going to fuck around anymore. Second one is we don't trust we'll find it. We don't trust that it'll actually happen. So that's why we're not good at it, because we act as if it probably won't happen. So then we just settle for bullshit. Third one is we don't believe we're worthy of the actual thing. So we sabotage it. We avoid it. We date people who aren't good for us. Fourth one, we don't have boundaries. So we're bad at dating because we don't have boundaries. We say yes to people who we don't even want to fucking go out with. That's so dumb, but we do it, right? We say second dates and third dates. We don't block people when they're full of shit. Like, it's so dumb, right? This is, and hey, raising my hand here, I've done this shit. That's why I know it. We have an old story getting in the way. I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, everyone cheats, everyone leaves, every guy's a narcissist. If that story is there, you will keep living it. That's a promise. You'll keep living your story till you're ready for a new one. We're not truly committed to it. I used to do this, so this is why I can call this shit out, is we say we want something, and we're doing something that's different than what we say we want. So we're full of shit. And the last one is we're not becoming it, which is really like, if you want something in a partner, you better be ready to fucking do it. You better be ready to be it, okay? So if you're ready to let those stories go, bam, we got that. We're gonna figure that out. So I don't wanna spend a ton of time on, like, you know, Freuding people on the couch and getting, you know, into the deep psychology of stuff. We don't need to know necessarily why we do stuff in order to change it. We just need to know that a behavior is not good for us. But as humans, we obsess about understanding why. And so I'm going to give you a couple whys, and then we're going to move forward, because I want to kill the game here. I want us to actually move forward and change and create and find relationships that fulfill us. So why do we attract who we attract, right? Like, your relationships, including dating, as I said before, are an opportunity to heal. All your relationships are. And so if you attract assholes, nice guys, if you have a hard time choosing people who are good for you, if you tend to lose yourself in relationships, all of these things are opportunities for you to change a pattern, for you to change a behavior. So whatever is happening in your life is evidence of what's happening inside, okay? So this is where we just need to have some conceptual understandings of biology. So I'm just going to go through a bit of that. And then I want to go through some of the wounding patterns so you can identify yours so that we can change them. Do you trust that you'll find the right partner, or trust that what you need will come to you? I'm going to get to that, I promise. Okay, so what are some of the differences between men and women? Some of the differences, and again, remember, the differences between men and women are actually in the mind biology are quite different, but the differences between men and women are actually less than the differences within men and within women. So the differences between the genders is different than the amount of difference within the actual gender themselves. And I'm sorry to be gender normative. This can be the same, and the balance of masculine and feminine, I'll talk a little bit about at the end of this. So men tend to utilize about 7 times more gray matter, and women tend to use about 10 times more white matter. So gray matter is a more information and action processing center, and it's in specific splotches in specific areas of the brain. And it can translate to a kind of tunnel vision for a man when we're actually doing something, which I guess is not totally unheard of, right? I'm sure all the people in the house are like, yeah, I get that. So, but white matter is more of a networking grid that connects the brain's gray matter and other processing centers with one another. And that allows for better information processing, blah, 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 all that stuff. Now, what also happens to be happening is the left and right hemisphere of the female brain is more connected. So you got multitasking, more emotional processing, and you can argue that this is both because of socialization, right? That women, as we know in the research, as soon as you give someone a baby, tell them it's a girl versus a boy, we treat those babies differently. So right away from birth and conception, we talk to men and women differently, and that changes their development of socialization about emotions and about, you know, what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. What goes on in our subconscious is that we construct, till about the age of 7, we construct rules of what it means to be a little boy, what it means to be a little girl, what it means to be part of our family, what relationships are supposed to look like. And so when you find yourself in conflict with any of these things, it's really sort of a conflict of your authentic need for expression and what you've been taught. So sometimes what we've been taught, and even about emotion and pain and conflict, can actually drive our choices in a way that feels overriding of even what we know is good for us. So this is why this is just really important to bring to the forefront, so that you can start to begin to go, oh, well, maybe that's why that thing happens. I don't like that thing anymore, so I'm going to change it. So the effects of estrogen and testosterone on the brain sort of change the interconnectedness. So estrogen causes more interconnections in the brain for women, and that usually happens around ages 14 to 17. So the left side is a little more logical, and that's a little more male, versus the emotional. You know, as we know, we tend to see women be more emotional than men. Have you ever noticed too that women will ask men, how do you feel? And men will ask women, what do you think? When we should actually be switching that and asking women how they feel and asking men what they think. And that's because just that word think versus feel causes us to go to a different part of our brain into a different part of our body. So men tend to have better spatial awareness, more motor control, and that's why we tend to become chefs more, or we tend to be better drivers. Sensitive, right? I know. But there's more female journalists, you know, those types of things. Now, the other thing is that oxytocin has a different effect on men and women. And what that is that when men and women have sex, it releases oxytocin during orgasm, and it's a hormone and a brain neurotransmitter, but the release of it also happens during childbirth and breastfeeding. And what happens when a woman releases oxytocin versus a man is that it tends to not last as long in a man, and that's thought to be due to the effects of testosterone. So it's thought to be the effects of testosterone on the oxytocin, which shortens its half-life. So if you're trying to have casual sex and you're a woman, you might find that you tend to fall more in love and it lasts a longer period of time, as where for a man, the association and the attachment might just be a little shorter. If you find that you tend to be more like a man and identify as a woman in terms of emotions, and if you're a man and you identify more as a female, then we might start to think of it being more like masculine and feminine energy. So if you're in a relationship or you tend to attract people who are more feminine in nature and you're more masculine, you'll find that is the polarity that causes attraction, right? You know, like we see often in this world that we've now living in, women tend to be very purpose focused, very wanting to make money and take care of themselves. And then they tend to attract men who are more feminine, more pushovers, more caretaking, who don't really tend to have as good boundaries. And you could argue in some sense, sometimes that independence that a female can experience doesn't allow people in, because it's actually a bit of a wall. Usually these are reactions, both for the male or masculine person and the feminine. Those are both reactions usually to childhood experience. Okay, so don't worry, I'm going to simplify this. So now we know some of the biological differences of men and women, and we're also going to look at what happens within our family. So I usually cover this in all my webinars because it's so important. So when we actually look at our family tree, this is how we learn how to do relationships. This is how we learn how to communicate. So what I want you to see is that, okay, I need you to pay attention here because this is super important. So everything you learned about relationships comes, unless you took a course on relationships at school, which you likely didn't, that's very rare, is that I want you to see that everything you learned about relationships, if you were to look up your family tree, you inherited. So everything you learned about communication and conflict and intimacy and sex and money in relationships and gender roles and all those things you learned from watching. And all of the people above you, parents, they then have 2 parents, then they have 2 each, right? So if you go up 5 generations, you have 30 people, assuming no divorce. So imagine you have 30 people's stuff, emotional patterns coming down into you. And so if no one has ever taught you how to take conflict and turn it into intimacy, how would you know how, right? It would be really hard to understand that. So when you get into communication patterns that don't seem productive, and you know how we often say, like, I never want to become like my parents, and then we inevitably sometimes become like them, or we become the opposite. So if we had a parent who was very controlling and overwhelming, we might be totally withdrawn and shut down to compensate, to protect ourselves. Okay, so what we want to do, and Jenny, the universe wants you to hear this. You can always watch the recording, so that's the good thing. So what I want you to do is okay, so usually we have two parents. And we always have two parents for the most part, but we usually have two different types of parents. We have one who is more controlling, overwhelming, and we have one who is more withdrawn, maybe working, maybe left. So we have usually two types of parents. And notice how they match each other. So the runners, the people who run away, who are more unavailable, and the people who chase. So we could say anxious and avoidant attachment. I'm going to talk a bit about attachment right after this. So I want you to think about what happens is the people that we attract in relationship tend to wound us in the same way as the parent who wounded us the most. So an emotional wound is defined as any need that doesn't get adequately met. So an emotional need not getting met, that happens all the time as kids, because for the first couple of years of life, we don't even have language. So we're all going to have needs that don't get met. But if you think about an emotional wound being like a physical wound, if you touch the stove and you burn your hand, you forever change your behavior around the stove, right? Same thing happens with love. You experience a wound and then you forever change your behavior around love. What if both parents are a little floozy? What if you had one parent or a missing parent wound? Don't worry, I'm going to get into this. So there's a couple questions that I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to explain how they work. So the first question is, what I wanted most as a child and didn't get was? So what I wanted most as a child and I didn't get was? Now for most people, you'll have wound patterns with both parents, but it's the one that wounded you the most. Now I'm going to explain this. So usually our answer is what I wanted most as a child and didn't get was, I wanted attention, I wanted to be important, I wanted to feel loved, I wanted unconditional love, I wanted approval and praise, right? I wanted, I wanted to feel safe, I wanted time with my dad, right? I love, not to be yelled at, to feel safe, to be seen, affection, love. So I want you to raise your hand. Who here has ever felt not chosen, not enough, not loved, not important, not safe? Like, look at those hands. That's the common human condition. That's perfection. All that shit is bullshit. Imperfection is normal. That's life. That's why you and I identify with each other if I share something that hurts me, if I share something that's hard for me. Because you go, I see me in you. I see me in your experience. That's what connects people. That's why vulnerability is an invitation to vulnerability. That's why vulnerability is just this most beautiful experience where it's the thing that binds us, but it's the thing we are so scared of. Okay, so make sure that if you're commenting that you put to all panelists and attendees. So just make sure you're doing that. Because then everyone can see your guys' comments, which is really beautiful because then everyone gets to see how much we can learn from each other because this is the thing that binds us. So whatever the answer is to this question will be the very thing that we tend to not get from the people we choose in relationship. So whatever the answer is to this question, it will tend to not be the thing we get from the people we are attracted to. Now, so this is the wounding pattern. This tends to be our core wound. One of our core, now what it does is that it defines a core belief about ourselves. So I want you guys to understand that all of us, what will happen to this thing that we needed is it will form a belief about ourselves that we all share. So that's the good thing is we all share this. So what's up? Word up, right? Is we all have this. Is no matter what it was, safety, security, attention, love, all those things, it will all come down to, I didn't feel like I was worthy of. Because if you didn't get safety, if you didn't get attention, if you didn't get time, if you didn't the belief that a child creates, remember your memories of this are through the eyes of a child, is it will create the belief that I wasn't worthy of that thing. So what happens is that when we enter a relationship, we're choosing people to try to heal this wound with. We're unconsciously attracted to people who hurt us in the same way. Now, what can happen, caveat to all of this, is let's say we had a parent who is really smothering. What we might do is we might pick someone who is overwhelming, controlling, and all over us. So we might go to the opposite extreme. And that's, now balance obviously isn't found in the opposite, it's found in the middle. So we don't want to go from feeling completely smothered and overwhelmed to not even having access to love. We want to be able to express boundaries to say no to the smothering and overwhelming and controlling, which we couldn't do as a child. But as an adult, we have to build that skill set. So great question. Can we heal this ourselves first? Yes. So dating offers this beautiful opportunity for you to do two things. One is understand what is your chemistry. Do you have a wound-based chemistry that attracts you to people who hurt you and are not healthy for you? Most of us have that till we don't, and that's okay, because that's normal. Now, the other part of this is you don't have to stop dating to heal, because the second part of this is if you give yourself that thing, you won't look for it from a partner. So this is why dating is so important, is because often if we needed to feel worthy, if we needed to feel important, if we needed attention, if we needed to feel safe, we have to give that thing to ourselves first, and then we take that away from the responsibility of the people we're attracted to, and we'll find that we're not even attracted to people who are like that. If we have commitment issues, it's because we're afraid to be loved. We're afraid to actually open ourselves up. So I want you to see two things here. If you're already dating someone, I don't know why I said two. I'm just going to say a bunch of things. It might be two. So if you're already dating someone and you find you're simply triggered about things, I promise you that the person that you're dating is also triggered by things you do, because they chose you to match their wound as well. So remember, this isn't one-sided. This is always two-sided. Always the other person chose you in a similar subconscious way. And so you can have a conscious conversation. You could watch this course with them, and people would be able to access this information and go, that's your wound. That's your sensitive thing. Your sensitive thing is that when I shut down, you feel like I'm going to leave because your mom left. And oh, your sensitive thing is that I get overreactive, and that causes you to shut down because your mom or dad used to yell at you, and anger is very sensitive for you. And so any raising of volume causes you to shut down. So what we start to see when we connect more to the child within us, then we start to see actually the child within other people. When we take the time to love ourselves and pay attention to ourselves, we actually start to be able to do the same. But we can't offer compassion and patience to someone else if we haven't offered compassion and patience to the child in us. Okay, now if you're poly is often an escape from intimacy too. So, I don't need to unpack poly right now though, because this isn't about poly, but polyamorous people tends to be an intimacy avoidance strategy. Okay, so remember, we're going from wound-based chemistry to real chemistry, right? And not to say that the previous one isn't good, because what it does is it attracts us to people who we have to change in order to, we don't have to change them, but we have to change our reaction to them. So if we're attracted to people who are unavailable, it's saying no to the unavailability. That's the growth. If we're attracted to people who are assholes or narcissists or controlling, it's saying no to them, and then we have the growth. So we're healing. This is healing. This is why dating is such an opportunity, because the moment you do something differently, the moment you say, I'm no longer going to go for that type of person, I'm only going to go for an emotionally healthy person, you're actually developing emotional health as you're going for them. So what happens is I'm going to get into this, but notice that everybody meets fuckfaces, douchebags, assholes, and I say that with compassion. This is just a form of expression. But everyone meets these people. Bitches, whatever. I don't even like all those terms, but it feels weird to say them. But everyone meets them, but only some people end up in relationships with them. Only some people end up in relationships with them. So we know that there's something different that some people are doing that others are not. And it's a pattern of choice. right? Okay, so now we're gonna fucking rock. We're rocking. I'm sweating. It's amazing. Okay, so attachment styles. I'm only gonna just briefly pump through this, okay? Emotionally healthy people are hanging out on here because we're all developing it, right? We're all developing emotional health. Emotional health is a development. No matter what you come from, you can create. I promise you that. No matter what you come from, you can create emotional health. That's because it's our work to do. The moment you take responsibility for your life is the moment that you actually change and heal. And who gives a shit how many men or women on here? I don't mean that to dismiss your comment, but if we find out how many men and women are on here, whatever the number is, what's going to happen is we're going to create a story about it. See, there's less men. I knew there'd be less men because there's less men who are emotionally healthy. You don't need a lot of men. You need one man. You don't need it unless you're poly. Then you got some, that's the challenge. But I'd get to the poly part before I get to the needing lots of partners part. Okay. Attachment styles. So attachment is research done a long time ago. Sue Johnson is actually like now I would say sort of the, she gets super passionate about it. She's sort of orgasmic about this subject. She gets very, very, very on it. So attachment is research based on what they did was they observed a mother interact with a child. So what happened is toddlers playing in a room, mom would leave the room, mom would come back. And if you look at this research, you can watch the videos on YouTube. I'm going to put the book attached in the follow-up link. I'll also put the video. Okay, so mom leaves the room, mom comes back. Yeah, it's Bowlby who originally did it, but Sue Johnson's now sort of the champion of that stuff. She's the one who gets super excited about it. Emotionally Focused Therapy is from Sue Johnson, which is Hold Me Tight is her book, which I will put in the follow-up because it is amazing. Okay. But Attached is maybe the best book for everyone to read to understand their attachment style. Okay, because anyone who follows me knows I'm like, just read that book, take care of yourself. Yo, go do it. Okay, so attachment style. So mom leaves the room, mom comes back, baby reconnects with mom, and that's what we observe is how baby reconnects with mom and what baby does. Okay, so mom leaves, mom comes back, baby's distressed, mom comes back, baby reunites with mom, won't leave mom's side. Baby believes that when mom leaves, mom doesn't come back. There's fear. Second one is mom leaves, mom comes back, baby reunites with mom, baby goes on playing. Third time, mom leaves, mom comes back, baby is like, I just noticed mom left. Pfft, no big deal. Mom comes back, baby's like, I don't really care. But inside physiologically, that baby is actually having the same physiological response as the one who had the distress and is afraid that when mom leaves, when mom comes back. So what happens is the first baby is anxious, the second baby is secure, and the third one is avoidant. So you can see in this picture, anxious is like, what's going on? I don't know where I fit. Avoidant is like, it's not really a big deal to me. And secure is like, yo, bring it in. I love you. We're cool. Okay. So what we want to start to see is that our attachment system is essentially a radar. And all of us have this, and it's not just for romantic relationships or familiar relationships. It happens at work too. It happens with friendships. Our attachment system is a radar, and it is constantly monitoring for the safety and security of relationships. So that's what it's constantly doing, is it's saying, are we okay? Are we okay? Are we okay? Now, when we look at anxiously attached people, they tend to be much more, their radar is hypersensitive, and they tend to notice facial changes or even changes in tone in a much more sensitive amount. And so they tend to be, as you guys know, we would think of these people as the chasers in relationship. They're the ones who overtext. They're the ones that get worried where they fit. Avoidant people tend to believe that relationships, people are needy when they are in relationships. Now, I'm going to give a couple qualifiers here. I would argue that empaths are probably anxiously attached generally and just have bad boundaries. Empaths just have bad boundaries. They just identify as empaths, but really they're sensitive, overtly sensitive people, which is great. There's great to be sensitive. You just have to have boundaries around your sensitivity. And so we talk about feeling a lot, but we really just don't have boundaries around the feeling. Okay. Is it possible to change your attachment type? Yes, absolutely. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you come from, you can move towards secure. The defining characteristic of a secure partner is my partner's needs matter as much as my own. So my partner's needs matter as much as my own. So my partner's needs don't matter more than my own, because that would be anxious. And my needs matter more than my partner would be avoidant. My partner's needs matter as much as my own. Okay. Now, the other side of this is, and in detached, they don't really talk about this, is you can flip-flop between anxious and avoidant. And remember, no matter what type you are, if you get a certain type of partner, they can shift you into a different type. So if you're a secure and you date someone who's unavailable and a cheater, you're going to start to become avoidant or anxious if you tolerate that shit over time. So you can flip-flop between anxious and avoidance. And because what happens is if you go from anxious, God, I need people, I love them, I love them, I love them so much, but it never works out, to I don't need anybody, you're just become avoidant. Because what you haven't done is learned how to be secure. You've just flipped to a different type of insecurity. And so that's why it's so easy to flip between the two, because they're both forms of insecurity. Now, the second part of this is that avoidance can show up in two types. There's fearful avoidance, which is if we've experienced abuse, if we've experienced sexual traumas, if we experience physical, emotional abuse, we'll often experience fearful avoidance, which people who are fearfully avoidant are actually want a relationship, actually deeply crave one. They believe in the benefits of them. They're just terrified to open their hearts to them because it leads to pain, is the way the story goes. So it's about, that's probably the best form of way to work through that, is to work with a therapist or a coach who's able to do that. But anyone can shift. And the simple thing to do to guide your decisions, which I want you to do for everything you do in life, but in relationships especially in dating, is starting to guide all your decisions with, if I was enough, what would I do? If I was worthy, what would I do? If I loved myself, what would I do? They're all just different ways of asking the same question. If I was worthy, what would I do? And it's going to require you to have boundaries, require you to have conversations, require you to cut people off, require you to block people, require you to open it up in different ways. What if you feel secure in a relationship, but there's no chemistry in that particular relationship? Well, I think what we need to do is first heal our previous wound-based chemistry, which is addicted to conflict often, or the chase. And what mostly happens is our nervous systems are actually confuse conflict with love. They confuse unavailability with love, because that's the model that we had with a parent. So we start to be really attracted to people who are not good for us. So it takes a while for the nervous system to recognize that safety is actually love. Now, safety, where a person still has mystery, is important, because, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in the dating part, so I'll just get to it. But here's the part that I think is one of the most important sort of recent realizations I've had within my own life to be able to share with you guys. And that is that be very mindful of your upper limits. And what I mean by that is, usually what happens in relationship is that we get to a place that we are already familiar with. So what I want you to see is, when you look at this graph, this very complex graph, on the y-axis, the one running vertical on the left, is the depth of intimacy connection. On the x-axis is time. And you see this graph go up and then flatten, and then go up and then flatten. So I want you to take your piece of paper right now, and I want you to finish the sentence. When I love people, they. And I want you could write it out in the chat box too. When I love people, they. So tell me, use me, leave me, take advantage of me, let me down, hurt me, leave, push me away, love me back, that's beautiful. Hurt me, are indifferent, don't reciprocate, stop wanting to be with me. When I love people, they know, what do they know? Disappear, use against me, stop seeing me, run away. Okay, feel like they can be themselves. That's beautiful. Okay, but notice that most of the stories don't turn out necessarily positively. So let's try another one, okay? When I let people love me, they. So the first one was when I love people, they. But this one, when I let people love me, they. Open up. Smother me, scare me. Good. Feel closer, think I'm beautiful. I can't answer this. That's a good sign that you haven't let people love you. Cage me, become dependent. They see me, disappoint me. They show up, they annoy me. Okay. So any answers that are like they smother me, they annoy me, they disappoint, that's usually going to cause us to be avoidant, withdraw, move away from the needs. Anytime they expect things from me, that's going to cause avoidance. So just really start to look at your answers for this. Now, what I want you to see is that however you answer this question is where this limit hits. So when you see that plateau in the graph, that's where you cap yourself in your depth of connection, because just beyond that is the thing you're afraid of. Is the thing you're afraid of. So I didn't just skip a beat and get remixed, is that every time you get to a certain place with someone that you're still in control, you're still familiar, you're still the one in charge, you know that just beyond this thing is the outcome that you're afraid of. So you dance in this bullshit plateau where you don't let yourself actually get the thing because you're afraid that on the other side of it is pain. Is this outcome, this old story. Self-sabotage. So how do we self-sabotage? We date people who are unavailable. We date dickheads. We date bitches. I don't like using the word bitch. I got to use something else. We date people who are unavailable. We date people just out of relationships. We date projects. We get into fights. We don't handle conflict well. We cheat. We cause people to cheat. We do all of these things. If it's not a negative thing that when you love people, just look for where you might actually limit it in a deeper subconscious space. Like when you let people love you, what is the actual, because if you're repeating a pattern in relationship, you'll tend to actually see that there's an upper limit that you're just not acknowledging yet. Because if you're repeating patterns, you're creating the same outcome, which means that you're probably creating the outcome that is actually the thing you fear. So when I love people, they cheat, and you keep dating people who keep cheating on you, then you know that that's your true outcome, even though your story might have been, oh, they love me back. That's the nice answer. It's just often not people's answer. Okay. So now, man, we're really crushing some serious stuff, right? Like there's years of thought and growth, and all you got to do, if any of this made you uncomfortable, good, because this is what we have to pay attention to, because the stuff that makes us go, that is really an opportunity for us to go, okay, there's some stuff there, and I just need to change the story. So, when you can be repeating, how do you know if you're repeating a pattern or you just simply don't like the person's personality anymore? That's possible. I mean, if they have a personality that you don't like, then that's actually possible. Okay, so let's just go with this, okay. So we know that we upper limit, and we know that we need to change the story. What I want you to understand is that we're always afraid of recreating the story. It could be from childhood, it could be from previous relationships, it could be, it could be simply from being in school and being bullied, or having kids who are dicks, where it's like, when I actually let people love me, they hurt my feelings. I can't trust them. They break it, that kind of stuff. So what I want you to start to see is that you'll never get to the same spot if you start to pay attention to the wisdom that's within the story. So right before the person cheats, leaves, lies, steals, blah, 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 whatever the outcome is, there's a whole bunch of information of where you took a left when you should have taken a right. I hear this a lot with, and I'll give an example. So I was I was doing an event where a woman asked me, like, what happens if I keep dating narcissists? And I said, well, at what point, how long did you date him? She was like, oh, I dated him for a year. And I was like, so nowhere in that year was there a red flag? Nowhere. And she was like, well, yeah, there was one. Right, so there was a time before that if you were to pay attention and not make it all about the person, the narcissist, because when we give that label to someone, narcissist, which don't get me wrong, clinically there are sometimes narcissists and people have narcissistic tendencies, but every narcissist requires a mirror, a codependent person, right? So what happens is because they're the people who want to change people, heal people, love people, right? So what happens is there's a place way before where we should have taken a left, but we took a right. And when we make it about them, we don't get to take responsibility for our role. Now, when we take responsibility for our role, then we go, oh shit, I actually created some of this. Yes, everything that is in our life, we said yes to. Everything. And when we can take responsibility for that, then no longer are we actually, our life is not the result of other people's choosing, it's the result of our own. And that is two parts to that. One is that's incredibly confronting because then we have to take responsibility for everything in our life. And that feels like a lot. And then the second part is that all of a sudden we feel incredibly empowered because now we can actually choose our life. Alan Watts, who I love, he's an Eastern philosopher who brought it to the Western world. And he called himself a spiritual entertainer. And there's a line that I love of his where he says, at one point when you wake up to responsibility and conscious choice, you become the God you were taught to praise. And not in the like anti-religious sort of way of saying you are now God. But notice how we have made God this thing that is outside of us, that we have to pray to, that power is outside of us. And he's saying that when you finally choose the thing, then you actually become empowered in the God that you are. Like you get to choose. Okay, so a year on healing and work and beginning to date, I'm pleasurably surprised at the minute proof of the work and shit time results. Yeah, like when people date someone who's like a narcissist or has those tendencies, they have very hard endings and often they're manipulative about self-confidence. But at the same time, in order to match with them and miss red flags, we have to take responsibility for our behaviors, which is not dismissing the pain of the experience. It's just saying, let's actually look at our role so we can take command of our life. Okay, I love you guys. All right, so let's become a master dater, okay? So here's the first rule of master dating, which is, look at that Channing, right? A little Channing Tatum, bam. Okay, so don't date people who make your brain disappear. Don't date people who make your brain disappear. Yeah, you'll get a copy of this recording with all the slides. I don't want you to date people who you are an 11 out of 10 attracted to, because what happens is that attraction level makes your brain not work, and it's likely wound-based chemistry and just lust, right? So you start to make decisions that are not good for you. And I remember when I first heard this, I was like, why wouldn't you date people that you're like incredibly chemistry attracted to? It's because there's a difference between lust and safe, beautiful love that you can still have great lust with. You can still have sexual exploration and an amazing sex life. I don't know what the question is. You'll have to ask it again. Okay, so don't date people who make your brain disappear, all right? And I know that Channing Tatum probably makes a lot of people's brain disappear, so it's a good thing he's married, because otherwise it'd be a bunch of people without brains. Okay, next one. And does not anyone else like this dance? I think it's a great dance, a little air hump. Is the GIF working? I can't believe it, right? That's what I thought. You're not dating people that you're not attracted to. You're dating people who are not 12s out of 10 in attraction, because those people tend to just be bad news. Let's be honest. Those are the people who cause us to not make good decisions and to sell our own needs out and our boundaries, right? Oh, he's actually divorced. Okay, well, we don't want him going on a rampage. So the next one is stop dating projects. Okay, so here's how project dating works. Do you like my dead end sign? Just don't do it. Okay, so they're not good for humping, because even humping people, just humping people is not just humping people. Any choice you make is not just a choice. And I'll get into that in a second. So we tend to date people who are projects because they're a distraction from our own work, one. They're a distraction from our own work. So we are focusing on them and their need to be fixed. The second part is we tend to date them because what it does is it creates a hierarchy in the relationship. It automatically makes us here and them here. So what happens is it makes us here and them here. And then they can never meet us because we've created a hierarchy in the relationship. The thing is, too, is that it completes a story. When we date projects, it's completing a story. Then I'm okay and they're broken. And again, that power dynamic happens. Now, what happens when we create a hierarchy in a relationship is we go, well, you're broken and I'm fixed, so you're going to need me. You're going to need me because you need help. You're the project. And if you're the one who's the project who dates people who fix you, then you're also dropping yourself in the hierarchy. You're saying, I need people who are here. Now, what happens is no one can ever meet us because the relationship has a structure where it's meant to never happen. One person's always giving, 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 and fixing, and the other person's always receiving, but feeling like they're not good enough, like nothing they ever do is ever going to work. And this person is in a position of power. Okay, so no one can meet us here because we're either here, and no one can love us here or here. And so what usually happens when people identify as being givers, I give and give and give and no one, right? Is that they're afraid to actually receive love. So they get lost in the giving. So everyone thinks they're working hard on relationship and they're doing all these things, but really they're not allowing people to love them. So it becomes a distraction. Can you ever reverse this kind of relationship? Of course you can. Now remember, anyone who dates, right? Like, because most relationships, when we're dating people who are projects, when we're dating narcissists, when we're dating addicts, when we're dating anything like that, on the other side of it is someone who's addicted to needing to fix people. So codependency, right? This is codependency. This is the dance of codependency. So when one person says, I'm going to get healthy, sober, whatever it is, usually the other person doesn't have anything to do anymore, so they go fucking crazy, right? They start to get it because their job is gone. And remember, when this person gets healthy and this person goes, but I thought we were fixing you, they no longer need the fixer anymore because they fix themselves. So the relationship loses its unwritten contract, its unspoken contract. Okay. And remember that when we have in relationship with people who give a lot, giving, you know, there's a great saying that says, nice guys are actually anything but nice, which is true of nice women too, like overtly kind people who do everything for everyone. There's always there's always secret contracts that are being created that if I do these things for you, you have to stay with me, you have to love me, you have to never leave, you have to do da-da-da-da. And these are called covert contracts. So can you explain more about codependency? That word feels insulting. Yes, that word insults a lot of people, so I get it. If you read the book Codependent No More, as Caitlin's referencing, it'll teach you a lot about codependency. So the model of relationship that most of us are taught, if you were raised by anyone who's a baby boomer or a Gen X, the model of relationship we've been taught is generally a codependent relationship, which is we need each other. Without this relationship, I don't have anybody. I don't have anything. So you look like you had, and I'm going to speak heteronormatively because that was the relationship type in the baby boomers, Gen X, our grandparents, is that, our great-grandparents, is that the man worked and gave up his life and his purpose to take care of a family, and the woman tended to give up her life and her purpose to take care of the family in a different way, to caretake. And so both of them didn't get to fully express themselves, didn't get to actually pursue their passions and dreams. They gave up a lot in order to raise a family and in order to be in relationship. So neither of them got to hold on to their own identities as they were in relationship. They lost their identity in the relationship. That's essentially what codependency is. But it's a lot more complex than that. Literally, I could do just a webinar on codependency because it's such a fascinating subject. But when you start to see is that if you're someone who overtly gives, or you date anyone who's addicts, narcissists, that's the other side of codependency, is the people who need to help people, the people, and you could argue that a lot of people who work as therapists, coaches, doctors, right, who are people who identify as healers, empaths, we, because I'm one of them, don't tend to have great boundaries around our giving. So it's become a job. So you just have to start to be mindful of people who overtly give too much tend to have bad boundaries, and people who receive and receive and receive are afraid of actually like showing up and healing and being enough to actually just be chosen without being broken, if that makes sense. Okay. Whew. All right, guys. Next, say no to the wrong people faster. This actually might be actually one of the most important parts of dating. Is that, I said this at the beginning, that everybody gets the same dating pool. Everyone gets the same pool on Tinder, the same pool on Bumble. Everyone gets the same pool. But some people end up in relationships with other people that swipe left to. So you have to become very mindful of what you're swiping right to, of what you're saying yes to. But if you could say no to the wrong people faster, you will put yourself in the position to meet other people who can take the place that they were in. When you fill a spot with someone who is not your person, who has bad behaviors, who is part of an old pattern, an old story, you do not create space for a new person to enter. Now, there's two sides to this that I wanted to talk about. The one is that a choice isn't just a choice. And the other side was, it was just in my brain. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm just taking a note so I don't forget. So I worked with this one person who said to me that, well, I have this guy that I just bang on Thursdays, and it's not really that big a deal. I'll bang him on Thursdays, and then I'll just find someone to be in a relationship while I'm doing that. Not while she's banging, but, you know, when she's not. And I was like, but it's not just a Thursday. I mean, if you're going to give up a night to banging, give up like a Tuesday. Thursdays are amazing. But all joking aside, when you actually look at it, your life can change literally in a fucking millisecond. Your life can change in a millisecond. So think about this. When you actually say no to the thing that is not exactly what you want in a relationship, not only do you take away the confusion that you send to God, the universe, whatever your belief system is, yourself, about what you're worthy of. Because if you say yes to anything that is not what you want, you're saying, I don't believe I'm going to get what I want. You're also sending a very confusing message to people around you and to the universe, God, whatever your belief is. The other part is that you could actually be in a different place at that exact same time where you could meet your person. So a choice is never just a choice. When you choose one thing, you say no to another thing. So when you stay in something that is not it, or you settle, or you go on dates with people who do not fulfill you, you say yes to things that are not, you have one night stands and you're doing shit that is not actually aligned with what you say you want. I'm not saying you can't do those things. I'm saying that if you actually want something different, then you have to be disciplined. You have to choose that thing. And really the universe is always going like, how bad do you actually want the thing you want? If you want to learn how to date well and you want to find your person, one, stay committed to what the fuck you actually want. And the second part is learn to say no to the wrong people faster. Because what happens is people end up in 3-5 year relationships with people they knew on date 3 was the wrong person. So you got to say no to the wrong people faster. Okay. What about use it or lose it concept that you need to have the romantic or dating energy flowing to attract it? Well, I don't think you need to use it or lose it. Like you need to bang people in order to attract the person you're going to bang. No. You know what you need to do is you need to put in a flow of you trust that the relationship is going to happen. How would you suggest saying no without being an asshole? No, I'm not interested. I don't feel like this is the relationship for me. Good luck with finding your person. How they respond to that will be very telling of their personality and who they actually are. And you say, hey, you know what? I've really enjoyed getting to know you, but I actually just don't feel like you're my person. And this is the chemistry or the connection that is what I'm looking for. Good luck. You have to learn to say no. Okay. And you have to cut the cord. You got to stop talking to exes. You got to stop filling spaces with people who are not it. So, all these questions you guys already know the answers to, which I love. So we'll just keep talking about it. You got to maximize your chances for success. So a lot of people will say, well, you know what, if I'm just meant to find that person, I'll just create a Tinder profile and I won't put any fucking effort into it and they'll just like me and swipe right. No, that's not how it happens. So first off, put pictures where you're looking at the camera. That actually maximizes the number of matches. Selfies are a no-go. Selfies actually get you less matches. And I mean, you have to prove that you have enough friends to take your picture. I think that's pretty good. Shirtless selfies, get the fuck out of here. Okay, a picture with you with a dog is actually actually increases your success a lot. A picture of you doing something active. If you're using a dating app versus a dating profile, have a great punchline. Like what was one I used to use? It was, I will judge you on how well you parallel park. I remember that was one. But you could have something like, I sing Ben Howard in the shower, or I don't know. I'd have to think about it to get witty, but you could pay someone. So no bathroom selfies. I freaking agree. They're the worst. Okay, so questions before even going on a date. Drug history, STDs, are you married? In a relationship, do you fish? Criminal record. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I think you could tell a lot from someone's dating profile, actually. And the other thing is you guys get creative with your profiles, use humor, have a friend read it, make an effort. If they're flaky, move the fuck on, right? If they're flaky, move it on. And if you have someone that you've been going out on a date with, going to go out on a date with, and they keep flaking, you could send a funny text that will trigger them, which you could say, wow, you're about to actually make it into the most flakiest person I know category, and see how they respond to that, right? These little things though. So what about not using an app? I'm going to get into that. As a man, I find it getting harder and harder to meet people organically. Walls are high, sadly with good reason. Notice the story you're telling yourself, Adam. That story is not helping you. There are going to be times when walls are high. There are going to be a time when it's harder to meet people. But remember, that story is protecting you from something. And it's also making it so that the landscape, which might feel that way, is not optimized for you. It already sounds scarce. It already sounds like woohoo. And I don't want you to go out in the world with that energy. I want you to go out feeling like, man, a motherfucking miracle could happen today. It's gonna happen. So imagine if you dated with the belief that your person already exists and all you have to do is live at your highest level of knowledge. All you have to do is live at your highest level of integrity. I posted a thing once that was said, when someone ghosts you, it's them dumping themselves for you. Look, I know ghosting is painful, but ghosting is not necessarily new. People used to say, I'm going to ride my horse over to your house later, and not ever ride their horse over to the house. Ghosting isn't new. And so when someone ghosts you, if you get the chance, you write them and you go, hey, you didn't show up. Or when you end something, I'm more than fine with someone not being attracted to me or someone not wanting to go on a date, but just disappearing is not okay. And start standing up for yourself. Start using your voice. That's so important. That's the healing part, is when we get ghosted and we go, shit. Or we actually reach out to them like, how's your Saturday? Fuck that shit. Start actually standing up in our truth and going, hey, when you didn't show up, this is what happened. And what you're saying to the world is, I'm worthy of being shown up for. And this person's going, shit, this person's got standards. Yes, this person has standards. That's important. The more important part, though, is to send the message to yourself that you have standards and you're worthy of being shown up for. So remember, people who ghost are people who self-dump. They take care of the dumping for themselves. They're never someone that you wanted a relationship with. But I do understand that you could be dating someone for 6 months and they just stop talking or text you or email you, and that's how they handle that shit. That says about their character. But often the story we tell ourselves is, I wasn't worthy of being expressed to or shown up for. No, they didn't have the respect for themselves to respect me. It's not your worthiness. You notice how we take it back and make it about our worthiness and what we deserve and what it meant about us, that we're not beautiful, that we're not da-da. Fuck that. Stop taking responsibility for these people who have not done their work, who have not done their healing, and that we're able to go, this is your shit, actually. This is your shit, and your shit stinks. And this isn't how you treat people. And what it does is it goes, I'm worthy of being treated well. Yes, and you don't want to do it from a place of anger. You want to do it from a place of high self-worth. Because often what we do is we do it from a place of reactivity. That's why we want to take a breath. Meditation will be actually one of the greatest things you can teach yourself, because it will allow you to create more space between what feels like rejection, abandonment, that core wound we're talking about, and what is actually happening, and being able to speak from a place of love. Okay, so remember, any form of rejection is just redirection. Rejection is the universe saying, I don't want you to have mediocrity. That's good. And that you don't want mediocrity from yourself. We always want to take responsibility for our own behaviors in dating. If we over-texted someone, if we chased someone, you have to remember that all the games that we play, the why men love bitches, how to pick up artists, all that kind of stuff, all these games we play, how to 9 texts to get the guy, all these things are doing is sending the message to someone that we have a high level of self-worth. But what happens is if we don't become the type of person who sends that type of message by asking questions like, if I was enough, what would I do? And then doing that thing. What happens is we just build a false veneer of confidence. And when you actually get into the relationship, what ends up happening is you end up actually showing who you truly are if you haven't done the work. So that's why the hacks don't work. There are no shortcuts in life. It's about building the self-confidence and the self-worth. And, got coached by an MFT. Yeah, you know what? There are plenty of people in the world who are experts in a certain area and do work in a certain area who don't live their shit, right? We all know that, right? Okay. Now, build an amazing life outside of relationship. This is actually maybe outside of the learn how to say no to people, the wrong people faster. This actually might be one of the other most important ones, which is actually build a life that is so delicious for you, that is filled with joy and fun and flow, and you doing things that you love. Now, what happens is, because we talked about meeting people outside of apps, Adam asked that, is we start to join groups. We start to join hiking groups. We start to join and try new activities. We start to put ourselves in places where we are likely to meet people who love what we love. And so when you build an amazing life outside of relationship and you build your own self-worth, then you're not going to choose a relationship, one, in order to heal, because you're doing your healing by not choosing the relationships that don't serve you. Secondly, you're also building your self-worth and putting it in your own hands. So whether someone chooses you or not, your self-worth is always high. And that way, you're never going to hold on to someone that does not support your self-worth, that does not support that you love yourself. So remember I said at the beginning that everything you choose will be evidence of what you believe. When you believe that you are lovable and worthy of a great relationship, if you have someone who does not reflect that belief, you either have to lose your belief, I'm not worthy of, or you get rid of them or invite them to show up in one of those things. And if they don't, and you get rid of them or they do show up, then you believe that you're worthy. You never lose your worthiness, but you'll never be attached to the need for them to choose you because you're always choosing you. There we go. Anyone have meditation starting places? It seems overwhelming. Yes, use the app Headspace. It'll teach you how to meditate. I'll send a link with that after. Okay. Now, let's get into this bad boy. All right, so the next one is pursue people who pursue you. Don't pursue people who don't pursue you. That's such a waste of your time. Pursue people who pursue you. That is the most important thing. Do not be the only one chasing. Do not be the only one chasing. So only go after people. Well, in order for people to pursue us, we have to give them space to pursue us. We have to put ourselves in the position to be pursued. A lot of the times people want to chase people, but they don't give they don't give the person space to actually come towards. And does a woman have to wait to be pursued? You know, I remember listening to a really great audio where the woman said, a hunter doesn't hunt a hunter. And so it's about the energy we put out. So what we want to do as both men and women is we want to practice putting out the energy of attraction and being approached. So if you walk around with the energy, which can feel false at first, but to practice having this energy of men or women or whatever naturally find me attractive. Men and women approach me. And you just start to cultivate this belief, your energy starts to change. Now, one thing that I know to be for certain true in my own experience is that as a man, we need to have boundaries with women. We need to stand true women obviously need boundaries too. But what I mean is that often for men, they've been raised in a feminist culture, which is beautiful. We've been raised by women. Our dads usually were working. And so there's a lot of reasons we tend to want to gain female approval. We tend to really have bad boundaries. And that's because we don't want to be controlling. We don't want to be all these things. These are the nice guy syndrome experience. But what happens is if you don't stand up to your partner, they won't believe that you'll stand up for them. That's a really important thing to know. This is why boundaries are so important. Then if you don't stand up to someone, they won't believe you'll stand up for them. So often we have subconscious tests that we'll do with people to see if they'll stand up to us. And if they don't, then they fail. Feminist culture, not feminine culture. I said feminist. And which is a beautiful experience. It's just like speaking in my own experience as a boy with a feminist mother, is that I was often like taught through the news that that men are bad, that men are rapists, that men are murderers. And I was so afraid of having boundaries because I thought it was me being controlling. So no one taught me what a healthy boundary was. And so I had to learn that as an adult. And, it's really actually kind of interesting when we finally say no to someone. And, in my own experience, when I finally say like, no, that's actually not okay how you were, then the woman's like, oh, now we're getting interesting. I've been waiting for you to show up. It's kind of interesting how that happens. So even in the approaching of men, what you want to practice doing is not being the hunter, but just starting up conversations. So you want to practice starting up conversations with anyone. So what I encourage people to do is when you're at the grocery store, whether it's a man or a woman, doesn't matter. Just be like, hey, do you know how to pick a ripe avocado? Or, I've done that when I actually needed to know that. And so it's actually an easy thing to learn how to do. But where you're like, have you ever tried this coffee? Or what is the best donut to get here? Or, when you're in line at a coffee shop. Or have you tried the almond milk here? Or, man, I sound so West Coast hipster, don't I? All my examples are like, is it artisanal? Do you know if this is artisanal and local and farm grown? But I want you to start practicing as soon as you get out there tonight, tomorrow, is I want you to practice starting conversations with everybody, not just people you want to get things from, or men or women you want to get. You want to practice starting conversations with everybody, because then your energy, when you start a conversation with someone who makes your brain disappear, is you'll be able to be like, oh, have you tried this water? Or have you done this thing? Or do you know where's a good place to grab food around here? Or whatever your question is. And, there's this really beautiful video that I saw online once where it had a woman walking down, or a guy walking down the street. I can't remember which one. And they had their phone out and they were looking at a map. And when they were looking at their map, they were like trying to find a place in the neighborhood or the city. And when that happened, they actually had their head down and they didn't see somebody they could have met. And then the other version of the story is they didn't have a phone and they were looking at a map and they asked for directions and they ended up marrying that person. And I think that's such a cool thing, is that you never actually know when life's going to change. You never know when something's going to happen and life changes. And you know what? I think it's just such a beautiful thing to believe in serendipity. So now the next one. Take a different fucking way to work. And this is one explanation of what I'm going to say that is important, which is get some variety in your life. Try something new. Change it up. Like, go to places where you thrive. Do activities that you love. Go for dinner by yourself. Join hiking groups. Do different things than you normally do. You have to switch it up. Now, in this study, which was done on luck, they asked people who don't believe they have good luck. Of course, people who don't believe they're lucky volunteer right away. They're like, prove how unlucky my life is. And then what they did was they studied what lucky people did. And they took what lucky people did and they taught it to these unlucky people. And what they saw was that when the unlucky people learned what lucky people did, they became lucky. Isn't that freaking crazy? So when unlucky people learned what lucky people did, they became lucky. And these are different things. Like, there was one where a guy only used to talk to attractive women at parties, and he started to make rules that he would only talk to people in shirts in the color red. And it ended up with him actually meeting someone who ended up buying his business or something like that, like something crazy. Another guy, he would go to different coffee shops every day, and he ended up meeting someone who was a diamond broker who ended up buying his company, different things like that. And that's such a beautiful thing to learn, that because ultimately what luck is the science of optimism. And if you want to get more woo-woo, it would be called the secret, is the belief that it's already going to happen. So I always recommend to people, like, imagine, as I said earlier, imagine if you walk around and your person already exists and that you believe miracles happen. Now, it can feel very different when it can be a different way of thinking than we're used to. And it can sound trite. It can sound non-concrete. But what happens is that the brain starts to fire the same way all the time, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people here who know about neuroplasticity, that neurons that fire together, wire together, they create bundles, and those are so much easier to actually navigate through. So when you see something happen, you go, I'm so unlucky, or I can't, of course that happened to me, because that's the way we've been naturally been thinking. So to think a different way requires concerted effort, and it requires actually taking the time to nurture our thoughts and move them in a positive direction. Now, when we believe possibility will happen, this is the research from Barbara Fredrickson, is we know why negative feelings exist, because if we were worried about bad things happening, we survived. All of us are evolutionarily here because someone was watching for the tiger or someone was watching for a bad thing to happen. So our brains are naturally wired to look for the negative. And so what we're teaching you how to do is start to look for the positive. We know that when people experience positivity, they created more community. They call it the broaden and build theory, which is when I'm in positive emotion, my mind is open. I see more possibility because I'm not in threat, which closes my vision down, narrows it, and looks for escapes. Not to mention that it puts your body, when you're in a state of gratitude, in a much lighter, calmer, easier position. Okay. So here's some smart online dating with your smartphone, right? I remember it's like, I thought it was supposed to be a smartphone. Why does it keep texting my ex? I remember seeing a meme that said that. So first one is stay on the app. Don't get off the app. Because don't get off the app till you know that you can trust them to give you your phone number. Stay on the app. And anyone who tries to get off the app and you say, I actually don't like to get off the app till I know that I'm a good match with someone, that actually shows that you care about yourself and you have boundaries, and it's such a simple thing. If you're worried you're going to offend someone with that, or they get offended, it's a great red flag picker. It will tell you a red flag right away. Meet each other quickly. That is really important, because a lot of people fucking will text their life away. If I wanted another friend who I could text with, I'd just text my friend. I don't need more people to text with, right? So that's the second part, is meet each other quick, because you won't know until you're in person. And I'm sure you have all experienced this. I've certainly experienced this when I was single, where you'd be texting with someone, you're like, want to grab a coffee? And they're like, oh, yeah, we will. Yeah, it's cool, we will. And they just fucking want to text, and they just ask lots of questions over text. It's like, put your money where your mouth is. Come on, let's go meet. Unless you're not actually who you say you are, which is possible. And you probably see my line here. Swipe right with your brain, not your genitals. So you have to actually get very real on what is it that you want. And when you're swiping right, actually fucking choose that thing. If you're swiping right to mirror selfies and chicks in their thongs and dudes with, mirror selfies, you could tell a lot by someone's Instagram profile. You could tell a lot by someone's dating profile of what they're actually looking for. I remember teaching this one friend of mine. I was like, what are you swiping right to? She loves dating douchebags. And I was like, well, what would you swipe right to? So we're going through Tinder with her. Tinder? Oh, she swipes right to disasters. Where I was like, well, yeah, this is obvious. So in the research, we know that if you look at someone's college dorm room, you can pick with great value. You can have a great view of their value system. If you look at someone's Facebook or their Instagram, you can tell with a great accuracy their values. You can tell with their pictures too. And this is what humans do, is we do what we call decision heuristics. We find shortcuts to figure out, which are really judgments. But judgments are what allow us to make really quick decisions about whether someone's an opportunity or a threat or a potential partner or not. And sometimes our picker is broken. Sometimes what we consider safe is really wound-based. Sometimes what we're attracted to is wound-based. So if you have a friend who knows how to call your shit out, get them to teach and call your ass out on your swiping. Now, the other part is swipe left to the red flags. Right away, just swipe. Because you gotta remember, every time you swipe right, you are saying yes to that person entering your life. It's not just a swipe. Now, swipe according to your deepest relationship intentions. And as soon as you experience something which does not feel right or feels icky or isn't okay, block that person. Get rid of them. It's the best way to do a boundary, is get their ass out of your life. What happens when people want to ask deeply personal questions up front? Like, why did you get a divorce? It feels like an interview and we haven't met yet. I can understand that. I would consider that a pretty normal question for me. So I would offer the question to you, do you feel defensive about it? Do you feel shame about your divorce? To be able to just feel into that is like I know it can feel like it's a little too much at first. And you can also say like, hey, why don't we talk about that when we grab coffee or something like that. Coffee or first date is a great idea. I don't think actually drinking is a great idea on a first date. So there's smart dating. Go somewhere public, especially if you're online dating, go somewhere public. Tell your friends where you're going. Limit your alcohol consumption for sure. Have an exit strategy. So what I think about that is like, have plans with a friend for a couple hours later that you can say you're changing if you want to stay longer. But have plans with a friend so that you can change them if you want to stay, but you'll always have an out. And be like, oh, I have to meet up with a friend later, but yeah, I'd love to do 6 o'clock, and have plans at 8. And vulnerability versus oversharing. This is a great question. You know, the other question about asking about a divorce or why did you get divorced? That doesn't feel really like a first text question, right? That feels like something that should have some rapport. And I was just inviting you to check in with yourself to see if it's defensive about shame about having it, or you really feel like that's not okay. The thing about oversharing versus vulnerability is I'll often hear people say, I'm really outspoken. This is just who I am. If you don't like it, blah, blah, blah. Like, you hear people say that kind of stuff all the time. And that's often a defense mechanism against rejection. So what we do is we spill and become overbearing and give too much, which just repeats the story that I'm too much. No one likes me when I'm myself. I'm too emotional. right? It validates the story. So we have to start being mindful of when we're oversharing and really dropping and dumping on someone, which recreates the story that no one can handle me, I'm too much for people. So often that's what's happening. So I just want you to be mindful of that, to start to think about that. Oh, is that what we need to do? Do I notice that when I go on a first date and I share a lot, are a lot of people not wanting to see me after? And if someone said, how do we know that boundary? You'll know that boundary by the results you're getting. You know, you'll know that boundary by the results you're getting. You can also ask questions like, oh, like, what are you looking for? Like, these are all questions I would ask on a first date. What are you looking for? Because that's the fucking point of being on a date. What are you looking for? When was your last relationship? When did it end? Why did it end? You know, questions like that. I had someone on a first date once tell me it didn't seem like I was looking for a relationship. What does that mean? I told them I was, or I wouldn't be on this date, but I didn't understand where that came from at all. What it could be is that they weren't looking for a relationship, or they were insecure with your security. That's possible too, right? In my experience, a man cannot handle my directness. I would imagine that that validates the truth for you, because there will be a man who can handle your directness. But if your directness is curt and comes from a sense of fear and a bit of aggression, then no man will want to handle it, because he'll likely fear it. So just be mindful of when your directness is assertive and aggressive, because it's usually because we're afraid of people not listening and people rejecting us. So just, this is the amount of attention we have to pay to our own emotional states. Okay, so mind your biology, right? So women tend to be attracted to, because, you know, when we look at some of the research on speed dating, when a woman says she wants something, well, when she actually is attracted to the guy in the speed dating, she'll change what she wanted to match the person that she feels the connection with. So just starting to take responsibility for truths here. So women tend to be attracted to men who have high status, high power, money, evidence of large amounts of testosterone, muscular. These are all biological drives. Men tend to be attracted to women who exhibit things of youth, because youth was equated to fertility. So survival for women was more equated to dating men who had power and status. So these are the biological things. So I'm just talking about this from a human evolution perspective. So this is why when you look at the sort of hacks that people try to do, and what skincare companies sell us is youth, right, for women. And we sell lip injections, and we sell ass injections, and that's because a certain hip to waist ratio was equated with childbearing. Like, all of these things are just different ways that the mind processes attractiveness, and we really have to start to take responsibility for what is good for us versus what is driving us. these are really important to really start to discern. Is youth the only thing men are attracted to? No, but physical attractiveness scores higher on a male's mate choice than it does for a female. A female will tend to want a high status male. So someone who's a high status, powerful in a group, things like that. If you look at like the history of most polyamorous societies, so multiple marriages, multiple partners, a few men will get all the women. And that's why historically those societies have tended to become violent, because the men, a few of the men get all the women, and then the other men don't tend to, they're upset about that, so they start a war, right? So it just makes sense. So I know we think, right, like I could care less about status, I could care less about money or anything like that. But there's a guy named David Buss, I think saying his last name right. He's sort of like one of the world's most renowned evolutionary psychologists. And he talks about how women tend to want men who have an equal level of education. And so he talks about there being a crisis in that there's more women going to university and getting their master's degrees and these things. So there's less men now in those areas. So women will feel like they have to compromise in order to find a match. It's really interesting stuff. So I talked before about these hacks that we try to do, like send 9 texts that win his heart, or why men love bitches. I said that those are really like where we're creating the illusion of self-worth. But what we're actually not seeing is that when people use hacks to create attractiveness, like steroids or like certain types of plastic surgery, like lip injections, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if that's what someone chooses. It's just that we have to start to see that on a deeper biological level, when someone sees that someone is bypassing the truth about themselves, it actually is a red flag to self-worth. Right? It shows that someone doesn't actually really love themselves on some level. And that's not a judgment of it. That's just on sometimes that can be what has appeared. So this is really, I personally think this was one of the most powerful shifts that I did, was stop trying to coerce the universe to give you what you want. Stop trying to control everything and make it so you meet your person and you're trying to navigate the geography and be at a place at a certain time. That just surrender and trust that everything's going to work out, but make the active, take the action towards the result you want. So yeah, I know that the word bitches, it's actually from a book. That's actually the title of a book. So I apologize for that. It's actually from a title of a book. That is the book that I just repeated. The other thing, okay, so is to surrender. Surrender to this possibility that it will happen, right? Like I said, to believe in the miracles of the possibility. And we are so busy trying to control everything that we actually stop, we don't let go and just allow life to unfold. And I think there's this really interesting part where we don't like think about growing our fingernails or our toenails. We don't think about growing our hair, you know, but yet we really try to manipulate how the universe works out in any other way. And I am a big believer in fate, but I don't believe that fate will actually come to you. I think you have to meet fate. I think you have to trust that you're going to get to the place where you need to be in order to meet that person. And that's by living at your highest level of knowledge. Okay. My therapist told me once, I accept I might be alone, then I'll meet someone. Well, there's a difference between being lonely, which is the misconception that someone else is going to give you everything that you are missing, versus being alone and feeling whole and worthy and choosing yourself and doing that thing that you always wanted as a child, giving yourself that, and then stepping into relationship from a place of fullness, of wholeness. We're already all whole, so I don't like to give the illusion that it's like you're not whole. You're whole as you are. But you have to allow yourself to fully become, to fully express, to fully be, be who you are, speak your truth, share your feelings. So stop dating potential, right? Stop giving away your own potential in the midst of dating potential. Stop trying to change people, right? And really, like, one of my favorite ones is get out of the business of convincing people to love you. It is such a losing business. You know, it is such a losing business when we're trying to convince people to choose us, trying to convince people to love us. So when we date people's potential, we give up our own. We see a future possibility in them, which is lovely, if we invite them towards it and they're actually moving towards it as we invite ourselves to our own potential and are moving towards it. Okay, so the next one is just like, you have to be willing to stay on this path. And I'm going to give you just some really quick things to understand what that looks like. So the first part, we talked about it earlier, I saw a comment on it, is make a list and be the list. Like, if you're putting anything on your list that you're not willing to do and be, then you're not going to get it. You're going to get exactly what you think it is. So imagine this. So if you want someone honest, do you lie? If you want someone healthy, you want someone drug-free, you want someone who's not in a relationship, are you in one? You know, if you want, like someone said that they attract married people. Well, if you attract married people with kids, you're attracting people who are unavailable, who can't fully choose you. So there's a belief that you're not worthy of being chosen. So when you make a list and you're not becoming it, I want someone who's emotionally healthy, who makes great choices, who lives in their integrity, who is are you doing all those things? So make the list and then go through the list and check to make sure you're that stuff. The next one is getting really, really, really clear on what your relationship intention is. What is your relationship, your truest relationship intention? And what you want to do with that is get very honest with what you're truly looking for. So if you're looking for a relationship that is going to lead to a family and children and those things, then be honest about that and don't choose anything that is not going to potentially lead to that. If you're looking to just date and explore and not have any commitment and just have sex or whatever you're into, be very clear about that, and don't date people who are looking for relationships who say they're okay with just doing that, because that's not going to be true. So that's the other thing to be mindful of. I hope that makes sense, is what is your deepest relationship intention, and then honor that. Okay, so now, won't that run people off if you say you're looking for a relationship? It'll run off the people who are not looking for a relationship. Isn't that beautiful? This is such a simple thing to do, is that we're afraid that if we tell people what we truly want, they won't want what we want. But what happens if they're the one? But they're not the one if they don't want what we want. So it's actually one of the greatest filtration processes, is telling people what you want and actually telling the truth and actually being yourself. It's such a beautiful thing. Okay, the next one is getting very clear with your deal breakers. So, I'm not on it right now. Hold on. Getting very clear with your deal breakers. So the first part is that men's deal breakers tend to be much more solid. And that's not because men have, better boundaries or anything like that. It's just that because there wasn't an evolutionary need for a relationship for men from a survival perspective, they tend to not be as flexible with their deal breakers. Women tend to have a bit of a harder time, and I'm generalizing, this isn't always true, so just so we're clear, because there was a historical survival need for marriage. Now, because women don't tend to honor their deal breakers as much, they don't tend to honor when a man tells them they're deal breakers. They tend to think that deal breakers are negotiable. So what I mean by that is that, let's say, like, deal breakers are usually like to have children or not to, when to have them. That will have them religion, to believe or not believe, what religion to believe, drug or alcohol use, using them or not using them, when to get married, if you want to get married. And the other part is that you want to share your deal breakers right at the beginning. Because when you share them right at the beginning, then you filter out the people who are actually not able to do those things. So what happens, when you meet someone who's a smoker and you're like, well, I guess I can deal with a smoker. You're now dishonoring your deal breaker in order to be in relationships. So you're making being in a relationship more important than your values and your needs. So this is how we want to start to look at it. Okay, now the next part is just looking at some of the red flags. So what are some? There's often a lot of red flags, but I wanted to give a summary of some red flags. So the first one is being unkind to strangers. That's a big one. Having very inconsistent communication. And I'm not talking just like they go to work and they can't text while they're at work. That's not inconsistent. They're actually working. but when they're like really hot and really cold, which I talk a little bit below. So trying to rush into taking you away on a trip very early on and spending too much money on you. Like that one, I see that red flag a lot, where a man or a woman tries to rush, it's usually a man, tries to rush someone off on a trip, spend them in lavish amounts of money on them, and really, where I'm like, well, they have to, there's like a belief that they're not really enough without this like escapade. The other one is dropping the L-bomb early and professing the soulmate path with you in like first couple dates. This is not that you can't be in love and have connection with someone at the beginning. It's just that it is just more often than not a characteristic of narcissism and sociopaths. I will get to those questions after. Guys with weird, untasteful tattoos has been a deal breaker for me in the past. Is that being judgmental? That's your own thing. If that's what you don't want, you don't want it. It doesn't matter to me. That's not judgmental. You're good. You can do whatever you want to do. Now, to someone who has tattoos, they might be like, that feels judgmental. And that's okay. They're allowed to have that reaction too. So doesn't ask you any questions about you, is unkind to you, very hot, very cold switch, like will insult you. Oh, are you having a bad hair day today? Like doing something where they're bringing you down and then they love you the moment you're down. Doesn't counter offer after a cancellation. So what that means is that could be something like, yeah, like 3 to 4 days, no text, and then coming back. But the counter offer is canceling plans and then not saying, I can't make Thursday, but can you do Monday? Something like that. So that is like, because when there's not a counter offer, that's telling you that there's not an interest in a rescheduling, right? Just very important to begin to understand, like getting very clear with those things. Never changes, right? Like they say they're going to change and they never do. Their words never match their actions. Changes only for a moment, like changes, but then as soon as, they get you back or they get comfort, they go back to their old patterns. Isn't open to feedback or growth. Makes you feel like everything is your fault. They belittle you or don't celebrate your success and your power. Like don't enjoy that you're achieving a lot of things in life, something like that. Overshare on the first date or talk trash about exes, like sharing too much about their past where you feel like there's an overshare. They're overtly protective of you and you have to defend innocent behavior. And what I mean by that is that there's like an overt protection that doesn't feel safe. It actually feels smothering and controlling. And you have to defend innocent stuff like hanging out with your friends or like going to do something where you would normally just have freedom to do. Okay, so I'm going to look at this. What if you cancel? Never changes. But what if you cancel? Why is that a red flag? It's a red flag if you cancel and you don't create a new plan. That's a total red flag for you, is like, if you cancel on someone and you don't make alternate plans with them, are you interested in seeing them? Are you going to wait for them to make plans again? Because if you're that person, you're not going to want to make plans with them again. I canceled on a guy who was not interested in and then did not reschedule, but I felt like it was because I just wasn't into him. Should I take a look at that? Right, I wasn't into him. Exactly. So you cancel on someone who you're not interested and then you don't reschedule. That's if you're him, he should be like, red flag, she's not interested. If he's watching this, he's like, I knew it. I knew she wasn't interested. Okay. Okay, how to get your needs met is the next one. So how do you, often we have expectations and needs in relationship, and someone asked, when is the right time to have that conversation in relationship? You can have a conversation about where your relationship's at the moment you need to create security and safety around the relationship. So if you're about to be sexual with them or have sex and you need sexual monogamy in order to feel safe, you can say that to them. Otherwise, you won't have safety around the experience. And your number one goal is your own safety and your own security. So you have the right to ask for those things. So in order to get your needs met, and you're allowed to have expectations in relationships, but often we don't tell people our expectations and then they fail to meet them, and then we recreate a story that no one ever meets our expectations and no one can show up for us. And so we fail to share them because we're afraid they're going to let us down, and then they let us down because they don't know our expectations. And so the story keeps getting recreated and they feel like nothing they ever can do is right. Now, the other thing is, if you have needs that need to be met, learning how to express those is an art. It's a practice to be able to say, hey, what I need from you is like a text in the morning. It makes me feel real good, things like that. But if you know your love language, for those of you that don't know love languages, there are 5 of them. There's quality time. There's words of affirmation, so being told that we're loved, we're beautiful. There is gifts, there is acts of service, and there is physical touch. And so what happens is that we tend to give love to people the way that we receive love. So if we really like gifts, we'll buy gifts for people. And often what we'll do is we'll want someone to learn how to love us by doing those things for them all the time. So if we really like when people do stuff for us, we'll do a ton of stuff for them and then really want them to learn to do those things for us without saying, I like when you do this thing. So what you can do is you can actually do, there's a love languages quiz that I'll send you guys, and you can fill it out. The love languages quiz you can fill out with you or the person you're dating, or you can just fill it out to understand your own first, and you'll begin to learn how you give and receive love, and that will allow you to tell people how to love you, which is such a beautiful experience. Okay, so I know that not everyone is probably looking for a long-term marriage relationship in this experience. They're maybe just learning how to date and explore and have fun, might just be out of a relationship. So this idea of having boundaries in the experience of having casual sex is just so important. So the first part is having alcohol in moderation, so important. Consent is sexy, like really making that such a beautiful part of the process. Aftercare, what do you need in order to feel loved after, in order to feel safe? If you're having this experience with someone, like, hey, I just need to know that, you know, like if you call me the next morning just to check in on me, that makes me feel really good. Or having breakfast with you or something like that. Having boundaries around that, having boundaries around what is safe for you, what is okay for you, what is okay in terms of the sexual exploration that you're doing. And mind your oxytocin, right? Like mind that you might be falling in love and start to catch feelings, right, as they call it. And so intentions, right? Like really getting honest with what are your truest, deepest relational intentions. So if you're having casual sex with someone and you actually want a relationship with them, that's allowed to shift over time, but you have to tell them and you have to communicate that for them. And the moment it feels icky for you, that it's not fitting with your truest intention, you have to honor yourself. Guys who push sex really fast, there's a question about that, is just hold it back. Like even if a woman or a man is wanting to push sex really fast, have a boundary about that. I'm not ready to do that. That doesn't work for me right now. And what you'll see is that you'll filter out people who are just holding out to have sex because they don't want to wait and put in the work. And so even if they're misrepresenting their true deepest intention, what I would do is then look back for the red flags where you might have ignored something, where you might have had that intuitive feeling like they just wanted physical and they weren't really ready for something. Okay, so the last piece is, I love this statement. I was told it once and it really shocked me, is you can be committed to your dreams or your excuses, but you can't be committed to both. We all know that what we desire in a relationship, the life we want to create, requires so much commitment from us. It requires discipline. It requires actually choosing the things that we truly want over what's easy. And so it's easy to choose a Thursday night. It's easy to have casual encounters. It's easy to not have hard conversations. It's easy to date people who are easy to get along with, to like, who aren't challenges, who aren't good for us. It's easy to stay in old patterns. And it takes a lot more to actually be committed to what we truly want. So do you want convenience, or are you committed to what you truly want? And it's just a moment to ask yourself, like, I want your guiding question to always be in everything you do, in your communication, your boundaries, your standards, everything has to be, if I love myself, what would I do? If I love myself, what would I do? And use the answer to that as the guide. And that's really what you want, is use that as the guide, because what you'll do through dating that way is you'll cultivate self-worth, standards, boundaries, and all those things. What is meant by challenging our partners? I just meant that having partners who are not projects, who are not, those things. I think that's what you're asking about. But we also want to find partners who invite us to grow. Whenever we get triggered, we're being invited to grow. Whenever we feel, we're being invited to grow. And in all of our experiences, I showed you guys that graph with the upper limiting. In all of our experiences, there is wisdom in that experience. In the pain of your past is so much power and so much wisdom that will change how your story plays out. But in your old story is all of the tools and the knowledge you need to build the version of you today that doesn't repeat the story. The challenge is that you have to rise to the knowledge that is already available to you. And so really live at your highest level of knowledge. I knew that there was a long time where I would learn things and then I would repeat it. That's what would happen. And then I started to feel the pain of the knowledge repeating the pattern, that I started to actually wake up to like, oh my God, I already know this. I already know that this choice leads to this outcome, which hurts my stomach and my heart, and it hurts other people. So I started to make a rule that I would always live at my highest level of awareness, at my highest level of what I've learned in my life. And so that's what I invite you to be at. Because it's honestly, it's the most freeing place to be. When you finally take responsibility for your life and you're dating, it's the most freeing place to be. So before I really crush these questions, which I'm excited to get to, I do have one thing that I have not actually announced to the public or on my Instagram. You guys would not have seen it yet unless you did the course with me. I know there's a couple people on here who are in that course. So I have the course, How to Find Him and Keep Him, which man can, or anyone who dates men or women can do it. It doesn't really matter. It was just titled that. And so if you want to dive deeper, you get a copy of the course, and we're doing a retreat. My really good friend, Mike Campbell, who's a men's expert from Australia, who's amazing. And I know there's a couple of people on here who've been exposed to him. He's really awesome. So November 2nd to 5th, it's in Whistler, BC. It's at the Fairmont Chateau, Whistler. It's going to include everything, your food, your room, individual rooms, not shared rooms. Includes your trip from the airport. $24.97 is the early bird. If you guys want to come to that, that early bird is going to be available. What is today? Today's Wednesday. That early bird is going to be available till Sunday. All you have to do is email info@markgroves.tv and ask for the application, and we'll get you applying for it. There's only 12 spots, and 6 of them are already taken. So if you guys want to do this, this is going to be a really big deep dive, even further into all of this work, but more individualized too, and it's a deep immersion. And you get the 6-week course before that, which preps you for the actual retreat. And if you've never been to friggin' Whistler, it's the best. It's so beautiful. And I will do a course probably in the spring or summer. But if you guys are interested in this, all you got to do is get to Vancouver Airport, and you can catch a shuttle that gets you out to Whistler. So with that said, any questions? So I'm going to first handle this question from Cheryl. How important is some level of initial physical attraction? If there's none, is that to say no to wrong people faster? That's a great question. I think when we're initially attracted to people who are not good for us, then what we need to start to do is to not trust our attraction meters yet, because we couldn't trust them before, if that makes sense. So we know there's something off with what our attraction was bringing us to. So we know that we need to recalibrate how it behaves and to start to calibrate to trust and safety as being more attractive qualities. When we look at the research on successful relationships, kindness is always one of the top qualities of a partner. So really starting to see these things. And if there is none, is saying no to the wrong people faster. I think I'd start to just feel into what it feels like to be with someone you can trust, who feels safe, who feels loving and kind, and actually starting to see what is attractive with people where you might not normally have saw that. Because if you're really attracted to people who are not good to you, then you know that there is a recalibration needed, and that takes time for the nervous system to stop chasing these things so that we can calm it down. And we can stop trying to fix people. We can stop dating people who make us feel broken. And we can actually start to feel what it feels like to love ourselves. And in that experience changes what we want in our life. We no longer want someone who makes us feel a certain way. Okay, so I'm going to go to, I see another question here. Okay, so let's see here. What kind of advice can you lend to start to improve self-worth? The best thing I can tell you is do an audit in your life for everything that makes you feel as though you're not enough, and starting to eliminate those things, or if they're people, inviting them to a level of standard behavior that makes you feel like you're worthy. And then the other thing is really what can guide those conversations is the answer to the question. If I believed I was lovable, what would I do? The big transition of core beliefs, like you'll get in that list from slides, is that core belief list will, I'm going to send you a meditation from Joe Dispenza, and you can use that Joe Dispenza meditation every day to work on that core belief and changing it. It really requires that kind of concerted effort. Is there always one person that likes the other person more in a relationship? If you don't like the other person as much as they like you, should you end it? Is it a healthy relationship? Often, we don't like people as much as they like us as an avoidance strategy. So we often do that to limit our own exposure and our own caring. So we go, I don't really like them as much. You know, they like me way more, which creates a hierarchy, right? Like they like me more than I like them. Is something wrong with me? So now we've created that. Like, well, they're chasing me. They're going to be needy. So we start to use it as a way of creating separation. What are your thoughts regarding the avoidant attachment style and acts of service love language due to the tendency of being used? The avoidant attachment style and acts of service love language. Well, the acts of service love language might be used as a way of getting the person who's avoidant, who's withdrawn. I think for people who experience avoidant attachment style, it's actually learning how to step towards love that is safe. Stepping towards people who want to care for you and actually allowing them to love you. If I was working with someone in a group who was avoidant, I'd have them stand in front of a group and have everyone compliment them and feel that, where they're not allowed to avoid it, they just have to receive it and say thank you. Okay, so let's get to these Q&As so I can... My ex and I broke up 5 months ago for a number of reasons. He was avoidant. We were moving in 2 different countries. We still remain in contact and even sexted a few times. We even just sexted a week ago. Thank you, that's great. Now we're both back in the same city and I've recently reached out to meet him, but he is now resorting to how he was before, says he's too busy. I don't know how to proceed and feel stuck and a little confused with his behavior. What do I do to move on from this? You tell him that his behavior is inconsistent and it's not fair that he's away, that he's okay with sexting and he's not okay with meeting up. And you ask him to meet, and if he's not capable, you end communication with him and you move forward. How's that? That seemed pretty easy. Once I have decided that I'm not choosing them, how do I tell them? What do I say in the text to let them know I'm not? Well, you could tell them, it depends how long you've been dating them, because you could pick up a phone instead of texting them. And if you're texting them, you could say, hey, I actually am not interested in this relationship. Can I just want to let you know that I don't feel like this is the right connection for me. I wish you luck and love in finding your person. Something like that. Okay, let's see here. My attraction meter is off as well. I always go for unavailable men. At the same time, I've had a handful of men that were readily available, but I wasn't interested. I'm working on this. However, in this process, is it unfair to try on men that communicate they are certain about me when I'm not on the same page? Am I doing them a disservice by dating them, or am I doing myself a disservice by not dating them? I'd say pick the one out of the group that you find has the highest potential. It sounds like you got some options. And I would go from there. And yes, dating is practicing, dating is sorting. You know, not every time you enter into a dating thing, you're never saying it's forever, you know, till you're ready to say that. So you're free to just be clear, you know, to say, I get scared sometimes when I feel overwhelmed, I'm just working through that. And you start telling people that, especially people who can handle that information. It allows you to heal. My version of a fuck yes in the beginning always leads to men who have narcissism, big egos, generally emotionally unavailable. Usually start with a lot of chemistry leading to many issues, toxicity. My fuck no usually are sweet, tender. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you discern between healthy fuck yes and healthy fuck no? And this pattern of choosing the same men for so long. It is easy to not check yourself when you begin to fall for the person, develop feelings. So people who are prone to falling for the charm of narcissistic people tend to be codependent. It's not an insulting word, it's just a clinical more term, and a lot of people have codependent tendencies, so I don't mean it as an insult. So what I would suggest is that you read the book Codependent No More, and you actually begin to look at your codependent patterns. And I think it's safe to say that what is a fuck yes for you is not actually a fuck yes. So you stop saying yes to fuck yeses because they're actually fuck nos, and you start saying yes to men that don't tend, who tend to be kind and tender, and you'll start to see that you feel safe with them and the outcomes are different. So you actually have to choose something different in order to change the pattern. If I know what I'm attracted to, characteristics and physique-wise, should I trust in that or try everything following the philosophy of you never know where you'll find someone? Yeah, I mean, like, I would just get curious and be open to your person being your person. And when you get to that space where you meet them, you'll know that you want to go date them, that you want to experience them, that you want to at least have some curiosity. But even a first date is not a forever, right? You're allowed to just dance in the exploration of what do you want in a relationship, what feels good, what doesn't, what are you attracted to, what are you not, all those things. What values do you really value in someone? Okay. Women that have had cancer or any other type of body disfigurement, how do you tell someone that? Because on the outside, they think I'm super hot, and then it's like I have this secret. Well, first off, my heart goes to you. I can't even begin to understand what it's like to feel that way. And secondly, is shame only really thrives in secrecy, right? That's what Brene Brown talks about that when you keep it hidden and you don't own it, then it feels like you have something to hide. And that energy might be something that you communicate with them, because why are you not super hot with this thing, right? Like it's this unique experience, this unique part of you. And when you own it from that, like, I've been through this really crazy experience and I've learned so much from it. The right partner will be like, hell to the yeah. That is so amazing. I'm so happy that you told me about that. I'm so impressed that you've been through that. And I'm so grateful that you trusted me with that information. Where it's not something that becomes empowered through or something that you hide, but it's actually something you celebrate. The energy of that is so much different where you own it. I find it difficult and emotionally exhausting constantly putting myself out there and being rejected. How do I move past that rejection? You start to learn from it, and you start to see that rejection is not, we have to look for a role in rejection, right? Like, how did I create this? What are the common themes in these rejections? What type of people am I picking? How am I behaving in this experience? We want to start to take real control of that. The second part is that we start to move this rejection being separate from our self-worth and who we are. Like, they didn't choose me, I must not be enough, versus they didn't choose me, there was not a connection for us, they're not my person. We start to displace it outside of who we are and how we feel about ourselves, and we make it more about the connection and the relationship. And that's a power, because I'm sure there's people that have wanted to date you that you haven't wanted to date. And why is it okay when you don't want to date someone, right? And so it's like a similar process is not, the moment you accept that not everyone is for you and you're not for everyone, you're much more free to let people go and be let go. Because we're so afraid to reject people because we felt the pain of rejection. But when we don't actually reject people and tell them where they fit in our lives, we don't give them the freedom of information so they can move forward. We keep them dangling by a string when we're afraid. When people do that for us, it sucks too. So I hope that answers that. What do men find attractive in women other than body type? I can't speak for all men, but I'll speak for all men because I'm the only one with the microphone right now. I mean, I really love a woman who's driven, who's open, who's honest, who's connected to her femininity, who has a high level of integrity, who's tender. You know, I really love a tenderness, who calls me to be greater, who calls me out, who loves me when I feel the most shame, who enjoys my emotional, because, you know, for a lot of men, and the research shows this, that women tend to be turned off by emotion from men, even though they say they want it. When a man cries, it often, in the research from Brene Brown, shows that women actually get angry at the men because they feel like they can't trust them, and then men don't feel safe to cry. So I personally really love that I'm safe to cry if I need to, or be emotional if I need to. And I love a woman who is emotional and has maturity and communication around her emotion. So I don't want to speak for all men, but that personally is my own experience. Do you only date one person at a time? If you're anxiously attached, it's probably in the book Attached, they talk about people dating more than one person at a time reduces that last man on earth syndrome, that scarcity feeling like there's only one person out there. So when we do that, we tend to get a different feeling. So you could date more than one person at a time when it doesn't become physical, or when it doesn't, right? Like that you're still you're going out 1 or 2 dates with a bunch of different people, and then you're not putting anyone at risk, and you're being open and honest with everyone about what you're doing. Those are personally the principles that I would adhere to. Once things started to get interesting with one person and you really want to explore it, that's usually where I personally have not connected with anyone else, because I want to focus on the one that I'm actually very interested in. That's personally how I work. Other people might work differently, but it's best that you get to know how you work and what feels right for you and feels an integrity for you. How I'm so guilty of this, and how do I correct this mindset? I don't know what mindset you're talking about. How do I broach the convo of what we are when you're getting in the face of being exclusive? Simple. You say, hey, I'm really enjoying getting to know you, and I'm feeling as though if I want to move forward further with this and get to know you more, I need to have a little more certainty around what we're creating and what we want from each other. And I really feel as though I'd like to be exclusive with you. And just declare it. I know that's such a scary conversation for people to have, but if you don't have it, then you're going to not get active information that you can act on. If you don't have that conversation, you're going to create vagueness, and you're going to create a lack of safety and security in your attachment system, which is going to cause us to get either avoidant, withdraw from the relationship. I don't want to open up. No, I'm not interested in this. Oh, they're not going to ask me about the relationship? Then I'm not interested. And then we'll go cheat. We'll go start dating other people as a strategy. Or we'll get anxious and we'll start to overchase them, when really what we need to do is just say, hey, what's going on between us? Okay, I'm going to handle as many questions as I can in the next 6 minutes. How to broach the convo. Okay, I did that one. If you're always saying no to the wrong people, how do you combat feelings of loneliness? That's great. I wouldn't combat feelings of loneliness. I'd actually learn to meditate, and I'd get to know those feelings of loneliness. Because in that loneliness is going to be a lot of information. There's going to be a ton of information that will teach you about what you're afraid of and what you're afraid to feel. So I wouldn't combat it. I'd welcome it, and I'd get to know those thoughts. Okay, now I'm getting on it. Okay, what are your thoughts on long distance relationships? Is it simply dating someone that is unavailable? It can be, but long distance relationships actually do quite well, and other relationships can learn a lot from them. Because usually what happens, we want to create a lot of security around long distance relationships. How much communication do I need? What are our love languages? How do we communicate enough? When do we need to FaceTime? How much do we need to see each other? All these different things. And then usually when long distance relationships come together, they usually do really fun things because they're constantly creating new. So they're always doing new adventures and new experiences, which keeps the relationship very exciting. So everyone can learn from these. So I hope that answers that. People always say you need to be happy yourself and love yourself and not need to love of someone else, but can't someone be a source of happiness for you? If you love someone deeply, do you need that love? Is it bad to need love from someone else? No, it's not bad to need love or depend on someone. Both of those things have sort of been lost in the shuffle of independence and after the feminist revolution. And, after patriarchy sort of saw a lot of women lose their independence, lose their financial independence, get really screwed over. So independence really creates a lot of walls. Interdependence is, I need you, you need me, we love each other, we depend on each other, we got each other's backs. But I wouldn't make someone a source of your happiness. I'd make someone contribute to your happiness. I think that's an important word differential. So I hope that makes sense. Carrie King, I relate, bam. Okay, how do you separate preferences from true deal breakers? If he's amazing, I guess I could put up with smoking, but I prefer not to. You decide what you're willing to put up with. So if you're not willing to put up with it, that's okay, but just own the things and then really live by them. Why do men and women swipe right and say that they want a long-term relationship but don't ever message you? It just seems like I'm swiping for nothing and I'm a selective swiper trying to read and see if there are commonalities. A lot of people are really flaky online because there's so much choice that they don't tend to message back at everybody. So I wouldn't make it so much that, like, why don't they ever message you? I don't even think we need to figure that out. You just need to work with the people who do message you and really get to know them, because the people who don't are not your people. You're not here to convince them to love you. You're not here to work on that in that respect. My hang up is that I don't think I'm worthy of love. That stems from body image issues and the false but hard to break belief that to be loved, I need to be skinny. I get that. The biological truth that men place a high value on appearance plays into my negative narrative and messes with my head. How do I reconcile those two things? That men value appearance, yet I need to stop the belief that I'm only worthy of love if I look a certain way. Ooh, that's a convoluted and complex question, because it has a lot to do with our relationship with food and our relationship to our self-worth. And addictions and all those types of things. So I think that the first part is that we can acknowledge that most people are attracted to people who have a healthy body image, who have healthy bodies, because healthy bodies indicate both, like oily hair. That's one thing that is attractive in evolution, because it shows that people ate rich, high-fat diets, so they were a better choice as a mate. I know, seems very odd, but it's true. So I think it's just acknowledging, like, I agree with you, that is true, that men and women tend to value attractiveness and thinness. But thinness that is not achieved by starving ourselves, but rather by having a healthy relationship to all things in our life. So that's not to diminish your experience or to discredit your experience. But for me personally, I've had a fluctuating relationship with my body and with food, where I often put on weight, then lose weight. But it's really the underlying belief as a child that I'm fat that is what causes me to fluctuate between the two, has caused me to. And so for me, I started to work on the belief that I'm fat to I am healthy. And that's what I made the work on, is as I build that and I get to know myself and heal that, and not needing the validation of someone choosing me for my body, but me choosing myself and healing these things, not for a man or a woman, but for myself. We all tend to have relational challenges with different things: food, fitness, people, work, purpose, money. We all have relational challenges. And I'd say anyone who has relational challenges with any of those things, which is almost everybody, is go find mastery in that area, but find it in a way that allows you a healthy surrender and letting go of the battle against it and start to understand it and learn to love it. That meditation from Joe Dispenza will be great for that, because that's actually what I worked on the majority for myself. Okay, so I hope that's helpful for you. It seems like I'm anxious at the beginning of a relationship. Once that wears off, it seems I become avoidant. Any thoughts? Okay, so all dating is going to create anxiety, just so we're all clear. Anxiety is going to get created from dating, because dating is just an anxious experience because we don't know where we fit. So if you're on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, you're going to feel anxious because you don't know where you fit. That's just natural. And so until you actually create certainty and security in the relationship, which happens from having conversations. So you just need to actually be able to have that conversation and have that conversation when you need it. Often avoidance happens when we don't feel like our needs are being acknowledged, or they haven't created security themselves. So we're anxious at the beginning because we don't know where we fit, and then we get them, and then their needs start to scare us, so we pull back because we don't know how to maintain who we are and hold boundaries around who we are and be in love with someone else. We often feel like we have to lose our needs and ourselves as soon as they start loving us, so it causes us to be avoidant. Where really what we need to say is, hey, I feel like I'm losing myself, or what I need right now is this. And what that does is it creates a boundary around our identity, but it creates safety so they can communicate with us like, hey, that doesn't feel good, that does feel good, as opposed to a wall that says, I'm just me, and this is the way I am, and I'm independent, and these are my needs. There's no access when that happens. We might be protected, but we're not connected to our partners when that happens. Okay, I'm going to take 3 more questions. How to say thank you for your time, but I'm not interested after you meet them a few times. You say exactly that. That's actually perfect. Thank you for your time. I really appreciated getting to know you. I don't feel like you're my forever, or I don't feel like this connection is what I'm looking for. I wish you nothing but love. And good luck finding your person. How soon in dating do you start asking serious, deep questions? You can ask right away. You can ask serious, deep questions right away. There's a great article called 37 Questions to Fall in Love. I'll send it to you. I like using those questions. Are great. I did those questions on the second date I had. Okay, let's see here. How long does it take to fall in love with someone? I don't know. That's a tough one. And when you tell them, yeah. My best friend is a guy, and we've grown closer since we both cut things off with our exes 2 months ago. We had sex for the first time recently. Hey, yo. I think I'm getting feelings for him, but I'm trying to hold them back. I also feel like I'm leaning on him to fill a void. Should I take a step back and save the friendship? Why don't you just tell him that you have feelings for him? Sounds like a good guy who's your best friend. Just tell him you have feelings for him. Why would you take a step back? Just tell him you like him. And maybe your idea that you're leaning on him to fill a void is to avoid actually connecting and being loved. Who knows? You won't know until you tell him how you feel. And don't hold back your feelings. Your feelings are happening. My ex demonstrates lots of signs of avoidant attachment style. Said when he was a kid and got in trouble with his parents, he'd go upstairs and lock himself in his room and stay up there till the next day, and they would never discuss. He ended up acting pretty avoidant with me as well. He admitted he always tries to avoid any kind of confrontational conversation, which is what caused a lot of our issues. When we broke up, he told me he wasn't hurting, never has, and never will. Said unhealthy as I think it is, do people like this ever change? That is just avoidance. That's saying, hey, you didn't affect me, and I'm not going to tell you that you affected me. But really what he's saying is you affected me and that I'm hurting. But that's just his way of telling people, is not telling them. Will they ever change? They might, but your job isn't to change people. Your job is to give people feedback and invite them to the growth. And if they can step into change, they will when they're ready. But you should never have to shrink to meet someone in a past relationship. You should invite them to meet you. So as you're growing and changing and your relationship ends, you shouldn't have to go backwards to meet someone. Their growth and transformation should bring them here so you meet them on the way. That's very different. Okay, I'm going to take one more question. I have a webinar on how to let go, which you can click on the link in my bio on Instagram. That'll give you lots of information. Okay, one last question. I'm a real type A, very successful, love to give. My life moves fast, but my partners often feel like they can't keep up, and it has caused a divide in the past. I find it hard to meet others who are on a similar path. I would look for how you use your fast-moving life to avoid people from actually catching you. That maybe your type A-ness, which is usually associated with perfectionism, is this desire to be successful, and you love to give, but never actually allowing someone to catch you, meet you, and love you. And when you do that, you're automatically always running from people who are just a step behind from you. But imagine if you slowed down. And you know, the curse of perfectionism is that we never really feel like we're enough, because anyone who's perfectionist knows that as soon as they get the thing, they just change the thing. So they never even get to celebrate the thing they achieved. So whenever we try to really become very successful, it's always a moving target, and we never actually feel like enough. The other thing is that when someone actually chooses us, we'll feel like a fraud in some way, because we'll always wonder if they chose us for who we are or what we achieved. So we still never actually get the thing we're really chasing, which is to be chosen for who we truly are. Now, the only way to really get that is to actually start to slow down and allow ourselves to be seen, and allow ourselves to not move so fast, to wind down our nervous system, which is going 1,000,000 miles a minute, and just taking the time to actually connect with ourselves so we can be caught. And that really is, I mean, what it's all about in dating in general, which is that the more you can take presence to the child in you, the kid in you, and the healing that you need, you can start to see that all the things that are in relationship are just invitations to heal and grow and transform. And then you can see the gifts that happen with repeated patterns. The beautiful thing about knowing all of this, everyone, is that when you know that patterns, when you know that they're just patterns, you know they're not who you are. They're just behaviors. Behaviors are not who you are. And so you can change them, because you don't have to change yourself. You change the patterns that go on around you, the behaviors that go on around you. And really what you're learning is how to get rid of the things that are not who you are, that are behaviors that don't help you stay connected, that don't help you stay protected, that don't allow you to have boundaries around your own identity and your own needs. So with all of that, I love you. I'm sorry for going over time. and I'm going to send you a link with these slides. I'm going to send you a link with a copy of the recording. All that stuff, as soon as it processes, I'm going to upload it. So it's going to take a little bit of time, probably a couple hours. I'm going to send you a link with all of the information. I love all of you. I hope this was so helpful. And I can't wait to see you guys again. If you want to come to that retreat in Whistler, please send an email to info@markrose.tv. And I can't wait to see you guys there. I love all of you. Have the best night. I'm going to stop sharing and go eat food. I hope you all have the best night, guys.